Welcome to Calming Bedtime Journeys channel. Tonight we climb a lonely medieval watchtower and spend an entire winter suspended between earth and sky, where every gust of wind rattles old timber, every distant movement across the snowy countryside demands attention, and every day unfolds within a world of stone, smoke, and silence. Have you ever wondered what it truly felt like to stand guard through the darkest months of the Middle Ages? What happened when snow buried the roads, supplies dwindled, and the cold seeped through walls that seemed solid enough to survive forever? The reality was often stranger, harsher, and occasionally more amusing than modern imagination suggests. So, before you settle into the story, take a second to like the video and hit subscribe. And while you're here, tell me in the comments your location and local time. Now, dim the lights and imagine yourself standing on a narrow road beneath a pale winter sky. The year is somewhere in the late Middle Ages. The exact decade hardly matters. Snow clouds gather beyond distant hills, and the world already smells of approaching frost. Ahead of you rises the Watchtower. It is not a grand castle that surprises many people. When modern audiences picture medieval defences, they often imagine enormous fortresses with towering walls and magnificent gates. Yet countless watchtowers scattered across Europe were much smaller structures, built for observation rather than comfort. Their purpose was simple: see trouble early, warn others quickly. You approach through frozen grass that crunches softly beneath worn boots. The cold air stings your nose. Wood smoke drifts from somewhere nearby, carrying a scent both comforting and faintly bitter. The tower grows larger with every step. Its stone walls rise from a low hill overlooking roads, fields, and distant woodland. From afar it appeared impressive. Up close, feels practical, almost stubborn. A squat guardian, nothing more. The heavy entrance door stands partly open. Iron hinges creak gently whenever the wind shifts. Inside waits the world that will become your home through the long winter months ahead. You cross the threshold. Immediately the air changes. Outside, the wind moved freely across the landscape. Inside, the tower trap smells accumulated over many seasons. Smoke, damp stone, old straw, leather, wool, a hint of stale ale lingering in wooden cups stacked near the wall. None of it smells luxurious, yet it smells lived in. A guard seated near a small fire glances up briefly. He offers a nod that communicates both welcome and mild disappointment that you represent additional company in an already crowded building. Very precious. A widely accepted historical fact is that many watchtowers operated with surprisingly small garrisons. Depending on location and importance, only a handful of men might occupy a tower during much of the year. Large military forces were expensive. Medieval rulers rarely spent money unless necessity forced their hand. You set down your belongings. The collection is modest: a blanket roll, spare clothing, a knife, personal items small enough to carry. Medieval travel encourages efficiency. If you own too much, you must move too much. The fire crackles softly nearby. You extend chilled hands toward the warmth. It helps a little. The tower's interior remains cool despite the flames. Stone absorbs cold with remarkable dedication. It behaves almost like a living creature determined to preserve winter indoors. You will learn this quickly. A narrow staircase winds upward through the structure. The steps are uneven from centuries of use. Countless boots have worn shallow depressions into the stone. You begin climbing. The stairwell twists tightly. Each turn briefly hides the world below. Sounds echo strangely here. A cough becomes louder. Footsteps seem to belong to invisible people ascending behind you. For a moment, the place feels older than time itself. Higher and higher you climb. Small arrow slits admit thin blades of daylight. Dust drifts through them lazily. The air grows colder with every level. That seems unfair. You climb upward, expecting warmth from exertion. Instead, winter greets you more aggressively the closer you approach the top. Eventually you emerge onto the upper platform. The view steals your attention instantly. Fields stretch across the landscape in muted shades of brown and white. Forests darken distant ridges. Tiny villages sit scattered like forgotten pieces on a game board. Roads thread between them, winding across hills and valleys before vanishing into the horizon. This is why the tower exists, not for comfort, for sight. From here, you can observe miles of countryside, travellers, merchants, messengers, potential enemies, stray livestock, occasionally someone who has become dramatically lost. The wind greets you immediately. It is relentless. Cold fingers tug at your cloak. Your cheeks begin losing warmth within moments. Somewhere below, a dog barks. Farther away, a cart rattles along a frozen road. Everything seems distant, yet strangely clear. You rest gloved hands against rough stone and stare across the winter landscape. A curious historical detail involves the signals many watchtowers used. Some relied on beacon fires visible across great distances. Others employed flags, horns, bells, or combinations of methods depending on terrain and local traditions. Communication networks often resembled medieval versions of emergency messaging systems, though considerably slower and accompanied by more smoke. The thought makes you smile a little. Historians continue debating exactly how effective some regional warning networks truly were during emergencies. Records survive unevenly, and practical performance likely varied from place to place. A beautifully designed system on parchment did not always function perfectly when storms arrived and visibility vanished. That problem feels easy to imagine. You look north. Gather there. Winter approaches with confidence. Below, workers hurry through fields finishing seasonal tasks. Livestock move towards shelter. Thin streams of smoke rise from cottages preparing evening meals. Everyone understands what is coming. The season always arrives. No one negotiates with it. A raven lands nearby on the tower wall. Black feathers shine against the pale ski. It studies you briefly, perhaps judging your qualifications for winter survival. The verdict remains unclear. The bird eventually departs. Not complete silence, never complete. The wind whispers constantly around the stonework. Wooden beams creak occasionally. Somewhere below, laughter drifts upward from the lower chamber. Life continues. As daylight slowly fades, you realize something important. This tower is not merely a military structure. For the next several months, it'll become an entire world. A small world, a cold world, a world measured by weather, routine, companionship, and patience. Winter has not even begun in earnest yet. Already you can feel its presence approaching across the land. The first snow will arrive soon enough, and when it does, there will be nowhere else to go. Morning arrives quietly inside the her, not because the place is peaceful, because stone muffles the world in peculiar ways. You work beneath a wool blanket that feels heavier than expected. The straw mattress beneath you rustles whenever you shift position. A faint draft brushes your cheek, slipping through cracks you failed to notice the night before. The fire downstairs has nearly died. You can smell it. Cold ash carries a distinct scent, dry and dusty, mixed with lingering wood smoke that has settled into every surface of the building. For several moments, you remain still. The tower groans softly around you. Timbers expand and contract with changing temperatures. Wind nudges the outer walls. Somewhere above, footsteps cross the upper platform as another guard finishes a night watch. The sound echoes through stone, slowly, deliberately. Like a heartbeat, you sit up and immediately discover one of medieval life's less celebrated realities. There is very little room. The sleeping chamber occupies only a portion of the upper interior. Several men share the space. Blankets, personal belongings, spare clothing, and equipment compete constantly for territory. Privacy barely exists. If someone snores, everyone participates. If someone talks in their sleep, everyone becomes an unwilling audience. If someone decides to repair boots before sunrise, the entire room enjoys the experience together. A commonly accepted historical fact is that many medieval military outposts prioritized function over comfort. Buildings were designed to serve strategic purposes first. Human convenience arrives somewhere much farther down the list. You pull on boots that feel unpleasantly cold. The leather stiffened overnight. Aniar by guard mutters something about frozen toes and poor life choices. His complaint seems well practiced. Perhaps he repeats it every morning. Perhaps he should. Descending the staircase requires attention. The steps remain narrow and uneven. Morning light enters through tiny openings in the walls, creating pale strips across the stone. The lower chamber gradually brightens as you reach the bottom. A small fire has been coaxed back to life. Someone crouches beside it, carefully feeding thin pieces of wood into the flames. The crackling sound immediately improves the atmosphere. Warmth is hope, even a little warmth. Breakfast waits nearby. The meal appears simple enough to disappoint a modern restaurant critic within seconds. Coarse bread, porridge, a small portion of cheese, ale diluted with water. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic. Yet after a cold night inside a watchtower, it feels remarkably welcome. You settle near the fire. Steam rises from the bowl. The scent of grain fills the air. Outside, the wind continues its endless conversation with the walls. As you eat, you begin paying closer attention to the tower itself. The building is compact, very compact. The ground floor serves several purposes simultaneously. Storage area, workspace, gathering place, shelter from unpleasant weather. Medieval architecture often demanded flexibility because every square foot mattered. Large castles sometimes offered specialized rooms. Watchtowers rarely enjoyed such luxury. A chest against one wall holds supplies. Nearby shelves support pottery. Tools and cooking equipment, bundles of firewood occupy valuable corners. Everything appears organized according to practical necessity rather than aesthetic preference. Function rules here. Always, you run a hand along the stone wall. The surface feels rough and cold. Tiny imperfections catch against your fingertips. The builders who raised these walls may have finished their work generations ago. Some might already be forgotten entirely. Yet their craftsmanship remains solid, reliable. The tower still stands. That counts for something. A particularly interesting historical tidbit involves graffiti left by medieval occupants. Archaeologists have discovered carvings, drawings, symbols, names, prayers, and even crude jokes scratched into walls throughout Europe. Human beings apparently remain consistent across centuries when given spare time and a hard surface. You glance around. It becomes tempting to wonder whether hidden marks exist somewhere within these stones. Perhaps they do. Perhaps previous guards sat exactly where you sit now, equally bored during long winter evenings. The thought creates an odd sense of connection. The centuries suddenly feel smaller. After breakfast, you continue exploring. The tower contains multiple levels, though none feel spacious. Each floor serves a distinct purpose. Storage occupies one area, sleeping arrangements fill another. Observation remains the priority above all else. The staircase links everything together like a narrow spine. Climbing it repeatedly becomes part of daily life. You quickly learn that medieval fitness programs required no special equipment. They simply built stairs, many stairs, and expected you to use them endlessly. At the upper level, daylight now spreads across the landscape beyond the arrow slits. Snow clouds remain visible in the distance. The countryside appears calm. Almost too calm, fields lie dormant beneath winter's approach. Trees stand bare against the horizon. Thin smoke trails rise from scattered villages. The view feels peaceful, yet watchfulness never truly relaxes. That is the tower's purpose. Every traveller matters. Every distant fire attracts notice. Every usual movement deserves attention. The hours pass slowly. Yelbian understanding why patience was one of a guard's most valuable skills. Not swordsmanship, not strength, patience. The landscape changes very little from minute to minute. Observation demands concentration despite monotony. Modern life rarely prepares people for such prolonged stillness. The tower forces it upon you. A question occasionally puzzles scholars. Some researchers debate exactly how isolated smaller Watchtower garrisons felt during winter months. Written records survive unevenly, and personal experiences likely varied widely depending on location, climate, and local support networks. One tower might feel connected, another might feel forgotten. The difference could be enormous. By afternoon, clouds cover much of the sky. The light turns silver-grey. Inside, activity remains modest. Equipment requires maintenance. Clothing needs repair. Firewood must be organized carefully. Small tasks accumulate constantly. No one remains idle forever. Even boredom has chores. You help stack supplies near the wall. The scent of dried wood fills the chamber. Dust drifts through shafts of pale light. A kettle simmers quietly over the fire. The atmosphere feels strangely domestic, not what many people imagine when picturing military life. Yet reality often includes ordinary moments hidden between dramatic events. Most days are not battles. Most days are routines. As evening approaches, the temperature begins falling again. You can feel it. The stone walls slowly surrender the day's limited warmth. Air near the floor grows colder first. Drafts become more noticeable. Cloaks appear on shoulders one by one. The tower prepares for another winter night. Outside, the first snowflakes finally arrive. Tiny flakes, almost hesitant, they drift past the observation openings and vanish into the gathering darkness. You watch them silently. The season has begun. The landscape below gradually fades beneath a thin veil of white. Roads soften, fields disappear, familiar landmarks become harder to distinguish. Everything grows quieter, everything grows still. The tower remains exactly where it has always been, standing above the sleeping countryside as winter settles across the world. And now, for the first time, it truly feels like home. The frost arrives in earnest during the night. When you wake, the tower feels different, not dramatically different at first. The walls remain where they were yesterday. The staircase still twists upward through stone. The fire still burns downstairs, yet winter has crossed some invisible threshold. You sense it immediately. The air feels sharper against your sin. Every breath seems slightly colder. The blanket that provided comfort only a day ago now feels less convincing. Outside, dawn reveals a countryside transformed. You climb toward the upper platform while rubbing warmth into your hands. The staircase feels colder beneath your boots. The stone almost seems to radiate chill from deep within the earth itself. At the top, the sight waiting beyond the battlements stops you for a moment. White everywhere, snow covers the fields below, woodland edges wear pale outlines. Roads that once appeared obvious now blend into the landscape like faded threads. The world has become quieter. A layer of snow possesses an almost magical ability to soften sound. Distant noises arrive muted and gentler. Even the barking of dogs from a far village seems subdued. The silence feels vast. You pull your cloak tighter. The wind answers immediately. It sweeps across the tower with renewed determination, slipping through every gap and opening. Cold air finds exposed skin with remarkable efficiency. The season has begun testing you. A well-established historical fact is that winter posed serious challenges for medieval communities. Travel became slower, agricultural activity decreased, and maintaining adequate food and fuel supplies demanded careful planning. Even modest cold spells could complicate daily life. Inside a watchtower, those difficulties become especially noticeable. You remain exposed to weather far more than most villagers below. The tower's position provides excellent visibility. It also provides excellent opportunities for freezing. One of the guards beside you points toward the eastern horizon. At first you see nothing unusual. Then movement appears. A small group of travelers, perhaps merchants, perhaps local farmers. Tiny figures move cautiously along a snow-covered road. Their pace is slow. A cart follows behind them, wheels struggling through slush and frozen ground. Watching becomes easier during winter in some respects. Tracks remain visible longer. Movement stands out clearly against white fields, yet visibility can also disappear suddenly whenever storms arrive. Everything depends on conditions, and conditions change quickly. You descend after your observation shift and return to the lower chamber. The scent of breakfast greets you before you even reach the fire. Porridge again? Nobody seems free. Medieval menus often favoured consistency over excitement. The warm bowl feels wonderful in your hands. Heat rises toward your face. Steam curls upward into the cool air. For a few minutes, life feels pleasant, simple, manageable. Then someone opens the door. A blast of freezing wind sweeps through the room. The fire flickers violently. Everyone complains at once. The door closes, peace returns. This routine will repeat many times over the coming months. Winter enjoys reminding people who truly controls the situation. As the day continues, frost begins appearing inside the tower itself. That surprises you. Tiny crystals form along the edges of narrow windows and stone surfaces exposed to drafts. They sparkle faintly whenever sunlight reaches them. Beautiful and deeply inconvenient. You touch one patch lightly. The surface feels like rough glass, cold enough to sting. A curious historical detail concerns medieval attitudes toward cold weather. Some surviving accounts suggest people often accepted winter hardships with remarkable practicality. Complaints certainly existed, but many individuals viewed discomfort as a normal aspect of life rather than an extraordinary crisis. That perspective may explain quite a lot. Modern expectations and medieval expectations occupied very different worlds. You spend part of the afternoon helping transport additional firewood into the tower. The task sounds simple. It rarely is. Snow covers uneven ground. The wood itself feels heavy. Gloves become damp. Fingers lose warmth quickly. Every trip up the hill leaves you breathing harder than expected. Still, the work matters. Firewood represents survival. Without sufficient fuel, winter becomes a much more serious opponent. The pile near the wall grows steadily. Each log offers reassurance. Each log promises another hour of warmth. By late afternoon, dark clouds gather overhead. The sky lowers. The landscape beyond the tower gradually loses colour. White snow merges with grey horizons until boundaries become difficult to distinguish. A storm approaches, not a severe one, at least not yet. Notices, experienced people learn to read weather signs carefully. Winter punishes carelessness with enthusiasm. You climb to the observation level again as light begins fading. The wind has strengthened considerably. It whistles around the stonework in strange patterns. Certain openings produce soft tones. Others create sudden mournful sounds that seem almost human. For a moment, you understand why old buildings often inspired stories. The tower feels alive. Not truly alive, of course, just expressive. Every gust creates a new voice. Every corner sings differently. Far below, snow begins falling once more. The flakes move sideways, never a promising sign. You remain on watch as darkness spreads across the countryside. Villages vanish one by one. Roads disappear completely. Woodland becomes a single black mass stretching across the horizon. Night arrives early during winter. Very early. The hours of darkness feel endless compared to summer months. A question that continues to interest researchers concerns how medieval people psychologically experienced these long winter nights. Written evidence exists, but interpretations vary. Some scholars believe seasonal darkness strongly shaped social habits, while others suggest communities adapted more comfortably than modern observers often assume. Whatever the answer, the darkness certainly feels substantial. It presses against the tower from every direction. Below, the fire glows warmly through an open doorway. The sight comforts you, more than expected. Eventually your shift ends. You descend carefully. The lower chamber welcomes you with warmth, conversation, and the smell of cooking stew. Nothing extraordinary fills the pot. Root vegetables, grain, a small amount of meat, yet the aroma feels wonderful after hours in the cold. Everyone gathers close to the fire. Naturally, humans have been doing exactly this for thousands of years. Outside, snow taps softly against the tower walls. Inside, shadows dance across stone surfaces illuminated by firelight. Someone tells a story, someone else corrects several details. The debate continues for far longer than necessary. Traditions apparently survive every century. You listen while warming your hands. The fire crackles. Wood shifts. Occasionally sparks rise toward the darkness above. For a little while, winter feels distant despite pressing against the walls only a few feet away. Then you climb back to the sleeping chamber. The temperature drops immediately. Blankets away, straw rustles beneath you once again. The wind continues its endless conversation outside. Tonight it sounds stronger, colder, more persistent. You settle deeper beneath the wool coverings and close your eyes. Beyond the tower, snow continues falling across fields, roads, forests, and villages. The countryside sleeps beneath its growing white blanket. And high above it all, your lonely watchtower endures another winter night. The cold no longer feels like a visitor. It has become a resident. Several days have passed since the first serious frost settled across the countryside, and winter now occupies every corner of your life inside the watchtower. You notice it when you wake, you notice it when you eat, you notice it while climbing stairs and standing watch. Most of all, you notice it whenever the fire begins to fade. The morning starts before sunrise. Darkness still fills the tower when someone stirs the embers in the hearth below. A faint scraping sound drifts upward through the stairwell. Moments later comes the welcome crackle of fresh wood catching flame. The noise is reassuring, almost comforting. You remain wrapped beneath blankets for a few extra moments, appreciating every remaining pocket of warmth. The air outside the covers feels unpleasantly sharp. Eventually duty wins. It usually does. You sit up, pull on your cloak, and descend toward the fire. The lower chamber glows orange in the darkness. Shadows stretch across stone walls. Smoke curls upward before escaping through openings designed for that purpose, though not always with complete enthusiasm. Some smoke inevitably remains. It perfumes everything. Your clothing smells of it. Your blanket smells of it. Even your hair carries traces of it. By spring, you suspect the tower itself will smell permanently of smoke and damp wool. An observation supported by many surviving records is that interiors often contain significantly more smoke than modern homes. Chimneys improved conditions in some locations, but ventilation remained imperfect, especially in smaller structures. The people around you seem unbothered, or perhaps simply accustomed. There is a difference. Breakfast disappears quickly. Warm food possesses a special value during winter. Even a modest meal can improve morale when temperatures remain low. Outside, dawn finally begins revealing the landscape. You climb to the upper level carrying a lantern. The metal handle feels cold through your glove. Above, pale light spreads slowly across the horizon. Snow covers nearly everything now. Fields, roads, rooftops, and hills blend into a vast patchwork of white and grey. The wind arrives shortly afterward, right on schedule. It sweeps across the tower platform with cheerful hostility. You pull your hood lower. The wind does not care. Cold air still finds its way in. A challenge quickly becomes obvious during prolonged winter weather. Heating a watchtower is surprisingly difficult. Stone walls provide strength and durability, yet they are not particularly interested in sharing warmth with the people living beside them. The fire downstairs helps, but only so much. Heat rises, certainly, unfortunately, much of it also escapes. The tower seems engaged in a constant negotiation with the season. The guards add warmth, winter removes it. Neither side achieves complete victory. You spend the morning helping gather additional fuel from a covered storage area near the base of the hill. The task sounds simple. The reality is less elegant. Snow reaches above your ankles. Ice hides beneath fresh powder. Every armful of wood feels heavier than expected. Your breath forms white clouds. Your fingers ache despite gloves. By the time you finish several trips, the tower appears far more welcoming than it did earlier. That is one of winter's strange talents. It lowers expectations. An ordinary room becomes luxurious once the alternative involves standing outdoors in freezing wind. Inside, the fire burns steadily. The scent of oak fills the chamber. You stretch your hands toward the flames. Slowly, warmth returns. One fascinating detail from medieval life concerns: bed warmers. In wealthier households, metal pans containing hot coals were sometimes passed beneath blankets before bedtime. The practice made sleeping considerably more comfortable, though it demanded caution and common sense. Neither quality could always be guaranteed. The guards discuss such luxuries with amused skepticism. Nobody expects heated bedding in a remote watchtower. Here, warmth comes from blankets, fire, and optimism. The effectiveness of optimism remains questionable. By midday, snow begins falling again. Tiny flakes drift past observation openings and settle against the outer walls. The landscape gradually softens beneath fresh accumulation. Visibility decreases. Roads become harder to follow. Travelers become scarce. Most sensible people prefer shelter during weather like this. A lone rider appears briefly in the distance, then vanishes behind curtains of snow. You continue watching. Hours pass. The countryside remains quiet. The tower remains cold. A lesser-known aspect of medieval winter life was the tremendous importance of fuel management. Wood, charcoal, peat, and other heating materials represented essential resources. Running short created serious problems long before food supplies disappeared. Everyone understands this instinctively. Each log placed beside the hearth feels valuable. Each flame matters. During the afternoon, conversation turns toward old winters. Every group contains at least one storyteller. This tower is no exception. One guard insists he remembers a season when snow buried entire fences and froze barrels solid. Another claims wolves approached so closely that their eyes reflected firelight beyond the walls. The stories grow slightly larger with every retelling. Naturally, memory enjoys decorating itself. Whether all details are accurate remains uncertain. Researchers examining medieval climate records frequently encounter similar challenges. Personal accounts provide valuable information. Yet human beings have always possessed a talent for exaggerating unusual weather, particularly after several cups of ale. The debate continues pleasantly for most of the afternoon. Outside, conditions worsen. Wind-driven snow rattles against stone surfaces. Small drifts begin forming in sheltered corners around the tower. The sky becomes a uniform sheet of grey. Daylight fades earlier than seems reasonable. By evening, the world beyond the watchtower has nearly disappeared. You stand briefly on the upper platform before darkness fully arrives. The experience feels almost dreamy. Snow swirls through the air. The horizon has vanished entirely. Villages that were visible yesterday no longer exist from this vantage point. White movement remains. And wind, always wind. You descend carefully. The lower chamber glows warmly compared to the world outside. Firelight dances across rough walls. Someone stirs a pot hanging above the flames. The smell reaches you immediately. Stew? Simple stew. Wonderful stew. People gather close to the hearth while darkness settles around the tower. Cloaks dry beside the fire. Boots rest near the warmest stones. Conversation rises and falls softly. For a little while, the cold remains outside. Not defeated, merely delayed. After the evening meal, you climb toward the sleeping chamber once more. The temperature drops with every step upward. The familiar rustle of straw greets you. Blankets wait, you settle beneath them gratefully. The wind continues pushing against the tower walls. Snow taps softly against narrow openings, somewhere below. The fire crackles steadily through the night. Its warmth will never reach every corner of the tower, yet somehow that seems fitting. Winter is not something you conquer here. You endure it, one careful day at a time, and as sleep gradually approaches, wrapped in wool and surrounded by ancient stone, you begin to understand that survival in a medieval watchtower depended less on heroic moments than on countless small acts repeated faithfully through the cold. By now, winter has settled comfortably into the watchtower. The novelty has disappeared, the cold remains, the wind remains, the daily routines remain, and so do them. You discover that much of medieval life revolves around food in ways both practical and emotional. Meals provide energy, certainly, yet during long winters they also provide structure, comfort, conversation, and something pleasant to anticipate while staring across frozen landscapes. The morning begins with familiar sounds: firewood shifting, boots scraping stone, someone coughing softly, someone else yawning loudly enough to suggest a personal disagreement with sunrise. You descend the staircase and immediately notice the smell. Porridge again, not surprisingly. Large pots simmer near the fire while steam drifts upward into the cool air. The scent is mild and earthy. Oats, barley, or other grains often form the foundation of winter meals because they stored well and could feed many people efficiently. Efficiency matters here quite a lot. You accept a wooden bowl and settle near the hearth. Heat brushes against your face while the rest of the chamber remains noticeably cooler. The first spoonful tastes simple, the second tastes better. By the third, hunger has improved everything considerably. One fact supported by surviving household records is that medieval diets varied enormously depending on wealth, location, and season. While nobles sometimes enjoyed elaborate meals, ordinary people often relied upon grains, bread, legumes, and whatever local resources remained available. A remote watchtower occupied its own category. The menu depended heavily upon supplies, and supplies depended heavily upon weather. Outside, snow continues covering the countryside. Through a narrow opening, you can see pale sunlight reflecting from frozen fields. Beautiful to observe, less enjoyable to travel through. The guard beside you tears apart a chunk of coarse bread and drops part of it into his bowl. The bread is dense and dark. It requires effort to chew. Nobody complains. Food that lasts through winter earns respect. After breakfast, you assist with inventory. The process is not exciting. It is important. Large sacks containing grain rest against one wall. Dried peas fill wooden containers nearby. Smoked meat hangs from beams where cooler air helps preserve it. Wheels of cheese occupy shelves carefully protected from rodents. Everything has its place. Everything has value. You quickly learn that winter encourages a certain appreciation for accounting. Every bag matters. Every loaf matters. Every missing item becomes noticeable. A lesser-known detail from medieval food culture is that some communities consumed surprisingly creative combinations of ingredients during difficult seasons. Regional recipes often evolved from necessity rather than culinary ambition. If something could be preserved, transported, or stored, someone eventually attempted to make a meal from it. Results varied. You suspect some experiments ended better than others. The morning passes quietly. A light breeze rattles the tower exterior while guards rotate through observation duties. Travelers remain scarce. Most people prefer staying near hearths whenever possible. A sensible strategy. By midday, preparations begin for the main meal. The atmosphere changes slightly. People become more attentive, even cheerful. Food possesses remarkable power. A large iron pot hangs above the fire. Inside, vegetables simmer slowly alongside pieces of meat added sparingly to enrich flavor. The aroma gradually fills the chamber. Onions, herbs, wood smoke. The scent settles into every corner. Your stomach notices immediately. You are not alone. Several others keep glancing towards the pot with increasing interest. Patience becomes difficult. The stew finally arrives. Warm bowls pass from hand to hand. Steam rises into the air. Fingers linger against wooden surfaces to absorb extra heat. The first taste feels wonderful, not because the meal is luxurious, because it is hot. Temperature matters, perhaps more than flavor. Outside, winter controls the landscape. Inside, a bowl of stew offers temporary resistance. For a short while, everyone relaxes. Conversation grows livelier. Stories appear. Opinions multiply. Someone insists that a nearby village produces superior cheese. Another strongly disagrees. The debate quickly reaches levels of seriousness normally reserved for matters of state. Human nature remains dependable. An interesting curiosity preserved in several medieval accounts involves complaints about food quality. People sometimes imagine historical individuals accepting everything without criticism. In reality, they frequently argued about meals, prices, ingredients, and cooking standards. Some traditions never disappear. The afternoon brings a welcome surprise. A messenger arrives. His horse appears exhausted, so does the rider. Snow clings to clothing and boots. Ice crystals sparkle along the edges of his cloak. He carries correspondence for local authorities and remains only briefly before continuing elsewhere. More interesting to the tower inhabitants, however, are the supplies accompanying him. Fresh provisions. Not many. Enough. The delivery includes onions, dried fish, and a small quantity of preserved fruit. The fruit attracts immediate attention. Winter limits such luxuries. You watch as the items are carefully stored. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is taken for granted. The arrival changes the mood noticeably. New food represents connection, proof that the wider world still exists beyond snow-covered roads. Later, while helping organize supplies, you notice a small pouch containing imported spices. The amount appears tiny. The value, however, is considerable. Trade routes carried spices across astonishing distances during the medieval period. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and other seasonings often cost significant sums compared with ordinary foods. A few grains could transform an entire meal. The pouch remains protected carefully. As daylight begins fading, preparations for the evening meal commence. Winter days feel short now. Shadows lengthen quickly across the countryside. Soon darkness will return. The fire burns brighter. Wood crackles softly. The scent of cooking fills the chamber once more. Tonight's meal resembles earlier ones in many respects, yet someone adds a small amount of spice to the pot. The change is subtle, remarkably subtle. Still, everyone notices. The flavor feels richer, warmer, almost exotic. For a few moments, the tower seems connected to distant ports, busy markets, and travelers crossing land far beyond the horizon. Not bad for a tiny pinch of seasoning. Researchers continue discussing how widely certain luxury foods reached smaller outposts like watchtowers. Evidence suggests regional variation was considerable. Some locations enjoyed regular access to traded goods, while others depended almost entirely upon local resources. Your tower seems fortunate, at least today. Night settles outside. Snow reflects moonlight beyond the walls. The landscape glows faintly beneath the winter ski. From the upper platform, villages appear as tiny clusters of light scattered across darkness. Then you return downstairs. The warmth welcomes you again. People finish their meals slowly. No one rushes. There is nowhere urgent to go. The fire provides companionship. The food provides contentment. Together they create something surprisingly valuable. Comfort. Eventually the bowls are emptied. The hearth continues glowing. Conversation softens. You climb the staircase toward the sleeping chamber while carrying the memory of warmth with you. The air grows colder higher up. It always does. Yet tonight the chill feels easier to tolerate. Perhaps because your stomach is full. Perhaps because the tower feels less like a military outpost and more like a home. Or perhaps because, during long medieval winters, a shared meal could accomplish what thick walls and roaring fires never quite managed. It could make people forget the cold, at least for a little while. The strangest challenge of winter in a medieval watchtower is not the cold. It is not hunger. It is not even isolation. It is boredom. A deep, patient, relentless boredom that arrives quietly and settles beside you like an unwelcome companion. The tower exists to watch. That sounds simple enough. Yet watching often means observing very little for very long periods. You discover this on a particularly clear morning. The storm that dominated the previous days has moved away during the night. The sky stretches blue and bright above the countryside. Fresh snow gleams beneath sunlight. Every distant hill appears sharply defined. Visibility is excellent, almost perfect, which means there is absolutely nothing happening. You stand on the upper platform with another guard while cold air drifts across the landscape. Frost sparkles on stone surfaces around you. Your breath rises in pale clouds. The view remains beautiful. Beautiful views, however, do not always provide entertainment. Hours pass slowly. A cart appears on a distant road. You watch it. A flock of birds crosses the sky. You watch that too. A farmer moves between buildings in a village several miles away. Remarkably, that becomes the most exciting event of the morning. Life in a watchtower encourages appreciation for small developments, very small developments. Evidence from medieval military records suggests that much of a guard's duty involved routine observation rather than dramatic confrontation. Popular stories often emphasize battles and alarms. Daily reality usually consisted of vigilance, maintenance, and patience. A great deal of patience. The sun climbs higher. Snow reflects light into your eyes. The landscape remains unchanged. Eventually you descend to warm yourself near the fire before returning to the observation post again. This cycle repeats throughout the day. Watch, warm yourself, watch again, eat, watch some more. I begin understanding why storytellers, games, songs, and conversation held such importance during long winters. The human mind dislikes emptiness. It seeks occupation. When excitement refuses to appear naturally, people create their own. One guard enjoys identifying distant landmarks and testing newcomers. He points toward the vague shapes on the horizon and asks impossible questions. Is that hill farther than the forest? Which village chimney belongs to the baker? How many sheep stand beside that barn? Nobody ever knows. I seems delighted regardless. The game consumes nearly an hour. An overlooked aspect of medieval life is the amount of informal entertainment people invented for themselves. Many activities left few written records because they seem too ordinary to mention, yet human beings have always enjoyed passing time creatively, particularly when trapped indoors, or halfway indoors, or standing atop a freezing tower near midday. Sunlight softens the snow slightly. Tiny droplets form along portions of the stone exposed to direct light. Water trickles briefly before freezing again as temperatures fall. The tower experiences its own miniature seasons. Morning frost, afternoon thaw, evening ice. You lean against the wall and survey the countryside once more. The silence feels immense. Below, fields sleep beneath winter's blanket. Woodland edges cast long shadows. Roads remain nearly empty. The world appears paused. For a moment, you almost forget why the tower exists. Then movement catches your attention. Several riders, far away, nothing threatening. Likely travellers moving between settlements. Even so, their appearance breaks the monotony immediately. You follow their progress for nearly 20 minutes. Such is the power of novelty. A small group of riders becomes a major event. Later, during the afternoon meal, conversation turns toward unusual sightings witnessed from the tower over the years. The stories vary considerably. One man claims he once watched a runaway pig evade half a village across snowy fields. Another insists he observed a nobleman fall from a horse while attempting an overly dramatic arrival. That tale receives enthusiastic approval. Perhaps surprisingly, medieval records occasionally preserve complaints about boredom among soldiers, officials, and religious communities. While survival remained a serious concern, many people still struggled with monotony whenever routines became repetitive. Some experiences truly are timeless. The discussion eventually reaches stranger territory. A tale emerges concerning mysterious lights observed years earlier near distant woods during winter nights. No one agrees on the explanation. Travellers, hunters, poachers, something less ordinary. The uncertainty seems to improve the story considerably. People enjoy mysteries, especially during winter. Academic opinions remain mixed regarding how many supernatural reports reflected genuine belief versus storytelling traditions. Medieval communities certainly embrace spiritual explanations more readily than many modern societies. Yet humor and exaggeration also played important roles. Human imagination has always been active after sunset, particularly near warm fires. The afternoon drifts onward. Outside, clouds begin gathering once more. The brilliant blue sky gradually fades behind thin layers of grey. Light becomes softer. More muted, the countryside takes on a dreamlike quality. You return to the observation platform for another shift. The wind has weakened considerably. Without its constant noise, the landscape feels even quieter. You hear distant sounds more clearly now. A dog barking, a cart rattling over frozen ground, the faint ringing of church bells from somewhere beyond the hills. Each sound arrives separately, carefully, as though winter itself has lowered its voice. Time moves strangely here. Hours stretch, days blend together, yet certain details become unforgettable. The shape of particular hills, the location of isolated cottages, the pattern of rows crossing snowy fields. You know the landscape more intimately than many travellers who actually pass through it. Observation creates familiarity. Familiarity creates attachment. Without realizing it, you have begun caring about the countryside below. As evening approaches, clouds thicken overhead. The first stars remain hidden. Smoke rises from village chimneys in straight grey columns. Families prepare evening meals. Doors close against approaching darkness. The entire region seems to settle inward, toward warmth, toward shelter, toward home. Inside the tower, lamps are lit one by one. Golden light replaces fading daylight. Shadows return to familiar corners. The fire crackles steadily in the lower chamber. You descend from the observation post and join the others near the hearth. The atmosphere feels relaxed tonight. No storms, no urgent message, no unexpected visitors, just another winter evening. Someone begins carving a small piece of wood while telling a story. Another guard repairs worn clothing beside the fire. A third quietly sharpens a knife. The activities are simple, almost mundane, yet they fill the hours comfortably. You realize that boredom itself has become part of life here, not an enemy. Not exactly. More like another season, something to be endured and adapted to later. When you climb towards the sleeping chamber, the tower feels unusually peaceful. Wind no longer rattles the walls. Snow rests quietly across the countryside beyond. You settle beneath blankets and listen. Nothing, almost nothing, only the occasional creak of timber, the faint murmur of voices below, the distant crackle of the fire. Tomorrow will likely resemble today, and the day after that may look very similar as well. Yet somehow the tower continues teaching patience through repetition, silence, and long stretches of watchfulness. A lesson delivered one quiet winter hour at a time. Night changes everything. The same watchtower that seems practical during daylight becomes something altogether different after sunset. Familiar walls appear older. Ordinary sounds gain new significance. Distances become impossible to judge. And the darkness feels enormous. You'll begin your evening watch shortly after the last traces of daylight vanish beyond the horizon. The climb upward feels routine now. Your boots know the staircase. Your hands know the rough stone. Your shoulders automatically brace for the cold waiting above. Even so, stepping onto the upper platform always carries a certain sensation. A transition. Below lies warmth, conversation, and firelight. Above waits the winter night. The air immediately bites at your cheeks. The temperature has dropped sharply since afternoon. A thin layer of ice glimmers along portions of the stonework exposed to moisture earlier in the day. The sky, however, is magnificent. Clouds have disappeared entirely. Stars stretch from horizon to horizon in astonishing numbers. Without modern lights filling the landscape, the heavens seem almost impossibly bright. Great rivers of starlight spread overhead. Constellations stand out clearly above forests and snow-covered fields. For a few moments, you simply stare upward. The view never grows old. Records from medieval Europe reveal that people often possessed an intimate familiarity with the night sky. Travelers, sailors, farmers, and guards all relied upon celestial observations in practical ways that many modern individuals rarely experience. Out here, beneath winter stars, it becomes easy to understand why. The sky feels close, almost personal. A gentle breeze drifts across the tower. Somewhere below, a dog barks briefly before falling silent again. You begin scanning the countryside. Observation becomes more challenging after dark. Shapes lose definition. Colors disappear. Movement becomes harder to detect, yet certain things actually stand out more clearly. Firelight, lanterns, torches, any small source of illumination immediately attracts attention across a dark landscape. Not far from the tower, a farmhouse window glows softly through the night. Farther away, scattered lights mark the locations of villages. Tiny golden dots rest against the darkness like distant stars fallen to earth. The sight feels reassuring. Signs of life, signs of people, signs that you are not entirely alone. An amusing detail appears in several medieval accounts involving watchmen who complained about nighttime duties during harsh weather. While vigilance carried obvious importance, many guards seem to have shared a universal preference for remaining near warm fires whenever possible. A remarkably relatable attitude. The hours move slowly. Winter nights always seem longer than expected. You walk short distances along the platform to stay warm. Standing completely still invites discomfort. Movement helps maintain circulation, though only to a degree. Your boots scrape lightly against frost-covered stone. Your breath drifts upward in pale clouds. The landscape remains silent. Almost. Then you hear it. A sound from the forest. Faint, distant. You stop immediately. The noise comes again. A long, drawn-out cry floating across the frozen countryside. A wolf, or perhaps several. The sound rises and fades among the trees before disappearing entirely. The experience sends a small shiver through you. Not entirely from the cold. Wolves inhabited many regions of medieval Europe, especially during periods when forests covered larger portions of the landscape than they do today. Encounters varied considerably depending on local conditions, but the animals remained a familiar presence in many rural areas. You listen carefully. Nothing follows. Eventually the night returns to silence. Elsewhere in the tower, another guard arrives to share part of the watch. Conversation remains quiet. Loud voices seem inappropriate beneath such a sky. You exchange observation. Nothing unusual. No travelers. No signals. No trouble. Good news, generally speaking, though perhaps slightly disappointing after hearing wolves. The stars continue wheeling overhead. Time passes. The moon rises. Its pale light transforms the landscape completely. Snow-covered fields begin glowing softly. Hills emerge from darkness. Forest edges become visible once more. The entire countryside appears washed in silver. Beautiful and strangely unreal at roughly the same time. Your imagination begins working harder than usual. Night encourages that. A cluster of trees resembles moving figures. A distant shadow seems to shift unexpectedly. An ordinary rock briefly becomes something mysterious, then becomes a rock again. The human brain dislikes uncertainty. It prefers explanations. Sometimes it invents them. The surviving evidence offers an incomplete picture regarding how much supernatural belief influenced ordinary nighttime experiences. Medieval people certainly lived within a worldview filled with spiritual possibilities, yet they also understood practical explanations for many events. Reality and folklore often existed side by side, neither completely replacing the other. The moon climbs higher. Cold intensifies. You flex stiff fingers inside gloves. The tower creaks occasionally as temperatures continue falling. Wooden beams contract slightly. Tiny noises emerge from unexpected places. Tap, crack, rustle. Nothing threatening. Yet every sound seems larger at night. One curious story preserved in regional folklore describes watchmen who believed certain towers produced ghostly voices during winter evenings. Modern explanations usually point toward wind moving through narrow openings and structural gaps. The towers themselves were innocent. The wind performed all the work.
Still, it is easy to understand why such stories developed.
A sudden gust sweeps around the structure. The resulting sound resembles a low, mournful note. Not frightening, just unusual. You smile despite yourself. Some medieval storyteller probably heard the same noise centuries ago and immediately improved it with ghosts. Toward midnight, activity finally appears. A tiny light moves along a distant road. You notice it immediately. A lantern, perhaps carried by a traveller, perhaps attached to a cart. The distance makes certainty impossible. For nearly half an hour. The small light progresses steadily across the landscape. Then it disappears behind a hill and vanishes from sight. The event is minor, yet it breaks the rhythm of the night. Observation sharpens again. Attention returns fully. This, after all, remains the purpose of the tower. To notice, to remember, to watch. Eventually your shift ends. The replacement guard arrives carrying a lantern whose warm glow seems wonderfully inviting. You descend the staircase gratefully. Each step downward brings slightly warmer air. The lower chamber welcomes you with familiar scents. Wood smoke, stew remnants, drying wool, burning oak. The fire still burns. Its orange glow fills the room with comfort. You extend your hands toward the flames. Slowly, feeling returns to your fingers. Outside, stars continue shining above the frozen countryside. Wolves may still wander distant forests. Travellers may still cross lonely roads beneath moonlight. Yet for now, none of those concerns belong to you. You settle near the hearth, listening to the gentle crackle of burning wood. The tower remains awake. The night remains vast, and somewhere high above the sleeping world, another watchman stands beneath the stars, keeping silent company with winter. The storm arrives without much warning. Winter often behaves that way. One evening the countryside appears calm beneath a blanket of snow. The next morning, the world beyond the tower has almost vanished. You notice the change before sunrise. The sound wakes you first. Wind, not the familiar breeze that usually circles the tower. This is something heavier, stronger, a continuous roar pressing against the stone walls. You remain beneath your blanket for a moment, listening. The tower answers with creaks and groans. Timbers complain softly. Loose shutters rattle. Somewhere above, wind pushes through narrow openings with an eerie whistle. The storm has arrived. By the time you descend the staircase, everyone is already awake. The fire burns brighter than usual. Several guards stand near arrow slits attempting to judge conditions outside. Their expressions reveal little optimism. You approach one of the openings. The view surprises you, or rather, the lack of a view. Snow fills the air, not gentle flakes, not drifting powder. A dense white curtain moves across the landscape with astonishing speed. The nearest hillside remains barely visible. Everything beyond it has disappeared entirely. The world seems smaller, much smaller. A review of medieval weather records and chronicles reveals that severe winter storms could disrupt travel for days or even weeks. Roads vanished beneath snow, rivers froze, communication slowed dramatically. Entire communities sometimes became isolated until conditions improved. Today your tower joins that tradition. Breakfast feels quieter than usual. People eat while listening to the storm. Every gust reminds you of the weather waiting outside. The tower remains sturdy, yet the force of the wind is impossible to ignore. Wood smoke drifts upward from the hearth. The smell feels comforting, necessary. The storm makes the tower seem more isolated than ever before. After the meal, observation duties continue despite the conditions. The responsibility never disappears. You climb toward the upper platform. The staircase feels colder than usual. Wind sneaks through every available crack. Snow has somehow found its way indoors as well, gathering in tiny patches near exposed openings. Winter possesses remarkable determination. At the top, visibility has become almost non-existent. You stand beside the wall and stare into a swirling white void. Nothing moves, nothing can be seen. Even familiar landmarks have vanished completely. The countryside that you spent weeks learning now seems erased from existence. Only the tower remains, and the storm. Hours pass. The situation changes very little. Snow continues falling, wind continues howling, the landscape remains hidden. Back downstairs, people adapt as best they can. Clothing dries near the fire. Equipment receives maintenance. Wood supplies are checked repeatedly. Everyone see and stays busy. Activity helps. An intriguing detail appears in several medieval accounts describing storms. Some chroniclers measured weather severity not through scientific instruments but through practical consequences. They recorded whether roads became unusable, whether livestock suffered, or whether travellers disappeared from expected routes. From that perspective, today's storm ranks quite highly. Not far below the tower, drifts have already begun forming against walls and fences. Snow accumulates in corners where wind deposits it relentlessly. You watch through a narrow opening as the landscape continues changing shape. Nature is quietly rearranging everything. By midday, the lower chamber grows noticeably warmer. Not because the weather has improved, quite the opposite. The guards feed more wood into the fire than usual. Additional warmth becomes necessary when temperatures outside continue falling. The scent of burning oak fills the room. Crackling logs provide a steady rhythm beneath conversation. Someone begins recounting a story about an older storm that supposedly trapped travelers inside a village chapel for 6 days. Another person claims the tale lasted 8 days. A third insists it was 10. The numbers grow larger with suspicious speed. Memory often improves dramatic weather. One charming anecdote preserved in local traditions from various regions involves snowstorms becoming legendary community events. Years later, people would still compare new winters against a particularly memorable blizzard from decades earlier. Every generation seems to possess one. The storm becomes a measuring stick, a benchmark, the winter by which all others are judged. Afternoon arrives, though daylight barely changes. Thick clouds reduce the sky to a dull grey ceiling. The distinction between morning and evening feels increasingly blurred. Time itself seems slower. Outside, wind-driven snow continues battering the tower. Inside, the atmosphere becomes unexpectedly social. Isolation encourages companionship. There is nowhere else to go. No visitors arrive. No travellers pass. The storm has effectively sealed the tower from the wider world. The available evidence leaves several possibilities open regarding how frequently small outposts experienced complete isolation during severe weather. Conditions varied enormously across regions. Some towers maintained regular contact with nearby settlements. Others could become remarkably cut off when winter reached its worst. Today feels like one of those days, a day suspended outside ordinary routine. Toward late afternoon, someone produces a board game carved from wood. The pieces appear worn from years of use. Several guards gather around immediately. Competition follows. Naturally, the game begins calmly enough. Then strategies emerge, then disagreements emerge, then accusations of questionable decision-making emerge. Nothing serious, just enough to entertain everyone watching. The storm continues raging outside. Inside, people argue cheerfully over wooden pieces. Human priorities remain fascinating. As darkness approaches, conditions worsen again. The tower shakes slightly during stronger gusts. Snow hisses across stone surfaces. Small amounts of powder force their way through gaps around openings. The world beyond remains invisible. Completely invisible. You take another brief turn at observation duty. The experience feels almost surreal. Standing atop the tower, you can barely see beyond the walls. Wind pulls at your cloak. Snow stings exposed skin. At dawn becomes a constant rushing presence. The landscape has vanished. The horizon has vanished. Even the sky has vanished. There is only motion. White motion in every room. In every direction. After several minutes, you descend gratefully. The lower chamber feels wonderfully welcoming. The fire glows brightly. Stew simmers above the hearth. People sit close together while shadows dance across the walls. A sense of shared shelter fills the room. Outside lies chaos. Inside lies warmth. That contrast becomes especially powerful during storms. As evening deepens, conversation softens. Some people mend clothing, others sharpen tools. A few simply watch the flames. No one seems eager to sleep. The storm makes companionship more valuable. Eventually, however, fatigue wins. You climb toward the sleeping chamber, while wind continues roaring beyond the walls. The sound follows you upward through the darkness. Blankets await. You settle beneath them carefully. The tower creaks again. Then again, not alarmingly, just enough to remind you that winter remains outside, testing stone, wood, and patience. You close your eyes. The storm continues. The fire burns below. Snow piles higher around the lonely watchtower, and somewhere beyond the swirling darkness, roads, villages, and forests still exist, waiting quietly for the day when the sky finally clears. The storm finally passes. Not suddenly. Winter rarely grants such kindness. Instead, the wind weakens little by little. The snowfall lessens. Grey skies begin breaking apart. By the following evening, stars once again appear above the tower. Everyone seems relieved. The silence after a storm feels different from ordinary silence, deeper somehow, as though the countryside itself is resting. Tonight, however, your attention focuses on something more immediate. Or rather, the challenge of achieving it. Modern people often imagine medieval sleep as simple. Darkness arrives, people become tired, everyone drifts peacefully into slumber beneath warm blankets. Reality proves slightly more complicated. You discover this while preparing for another winter night in the watchtower. The evening meal has ended. The fire still glows warmly in the lower chamber. A few guards remain awake, quietly talking beside the hearth. You climb the staircase carrying a small lantern. Its flame flickers gently. The upper sleeping area waits in darkness beyond. The familiar scent greets you immediately. Straw, wool, leather, smoke. The combined aroma has become part of daily life. Not pleasant exactly, not unpleasant either, simply familiar. You set the lantern down and begin arranging your bedding. The process matters more than outsiders might expect. Every blanket has a purpose. Every fold matters. A detail frequently mentioned in surviving household records is that bedding represented a valuable possession in medieval society. Good blankets, quality linens, and warm coverings could be expensive and highly prized. During winter, their value became especially obvious. The temperature upstairs remains noticeably colder than near the fire below. Heat rises, certainly, but not enough to transform the sleeping chamber into a cozy retreat. Cold air lingers stubbornly. You settle onto the mattress. Calling it a mattress requires generosity. The structure consists largely of straw packed within fabric coverings. It provides some cushioning, not much. Still, after weeks in the tower, your standards have adjusted. Remarkably, the straw rustles softly beneath you. A nearby guard jokes that the bedding becomes more comfortable every month because expectations continue falling. Nobody disagrees. Elsewhere in the chamber, people prepare for sleep in their own ways. Cloaks are folded carefully, boots are positioned nearby, personal belongings remain within easy reach. The routines have become automatic. Comfort emerges through familiarity, not luxury. One small but fascinating detail from medieval life involves sleeping positions. Historical artwork and short written descriptions suggest that many people often slept partially upright or with heads elevated more than modern sleepers typically prefer. The reasons remain debated. Health beliefs may have played a role. Practical considerations may have contributed as well. Whatever the explanation, sleeping arrangements varied considerably across different communities. You pull a blanket tighter around your shoulders. The wool feels rough against your skin, yet it traps warmth effectively. That matters more. Outside, moonlight shines across the snow-covered countryside. Through a narrow opening, you can see part of the landscape glowing pale silver beneath the stars. The view appears peaceful, almost serene. The reality inside the sleeping chamber proves less tranquil. Someone snores loudly. Another person shifts position every few minutes. A third seems determined to conduct an ongoing argument with the imaginary opponents while asleep. Life in shared quarters offers many educational experiences. Privacy is rarely among them. The hours pass slowly. Sleep comes and goes. The tower itself contributes occasional noises. Timber creaks, wind brushes against stone. Tiny sounds emerge from distant corners. Nothing alarming, just reminders that old buildings possess personalities. A question that continues puzzling some historians concerns the exact sleep patterns common during the medieval period. Various sources suggest many people may have experienced segmented sleep, waking for a period during the night before returning to bed. The evidence is intriguing, though not entirely conclusive. As midnight approaches, you find yourself awake again, not fully awake. Just enough! The sleeping chamber remains dimly illuminated by faint moonlight entering through narrow openings. Shadows stretch across the walls. Everyone else appears asleep, or mostly asleep. The atmosphere feels strangely peaceful. You listen. A soft breeze, gentle snoring, the distant crackle of the fire below. For a moment, the tower seems suspended outside time. Then someone snores with renewed enthusiasm. The moment passes. You smile despite yourself. A peculiar note preserved in several historical anecdotes concerns animals sharing sleeping spaces with humans, depending on location and circumstance. Dogs, cats, and occasionally other creatures sometimes occupied indoor areas during cold weather. Such arrangement offered advantage and certain aromatic disadvantage. Certainly, your tower remains relatively free of livestock, a fact everyone appreciates. Eventually you drift back towards sleep. Dreams arrive briefly, then vanish. The night continues. Hours later, you wake again, this time from cold. The fire downstairs has burned lower. Temperatures throughout the tower have fallen noticeably. Frost has formed along portions of the stone near exposed openings. You pull the blanket higher. Others do the same. Without fully waking, people adjust instinctively. Winter teaches efficiency. Nobody wishes to leave a warm blanket unless absolutely necessary. Beyond the walls, the countryside remains silent beneath moonlight. Snow reflects enough light to brighten the landscape even during darkness. The world appears almost luminous, a frozen kingdom of silver and blue. Toward dawn, the cold reaches its daily peak. The air feels crisp enough to bite. Your nose notices first, then your fingers, then everything else. Yet morning slowly approaches. The sky beyond the openings begins changing color. Black becomes dark blue becomes grey. The night is ending. You rise reluctantly from the bedding. The straw crackles beneath you. Your joints protest mildly. The floor feels cold beneath your boots. Another day begins. Descending toward the lower chamber feels particularly rewarding this morning. The scent of wood smoke reaches you halfway down the staircase. Then comes warmth, glorious warmth. The fire has been revived. Flames dance across fresh logs. Orange light fills the room. Steam rises from breakfast preparations. People gather near the hearth almost immediately. Like migrating birds discovering favorable weather, the mood feels cheerful. A successful night's sleep in a medieval watchtower does not necessarily mean sleeping perfectly. It means sleeping enough. Enough warmth, enough rest, enough comfort to continue. You settle near the fire and extend your hands toward the heat. Outside, winter still dominates the countryside. Snow still covers roads and fields. The season remains far from finished. Yet another night has passed. Another dawn has arrived. And high within the old stone tower, you have learned that medieval sleep was less about luxury and more about resilience, adaptation, and finding rest wherever warmth and shelter could be found. The storm may have passed, but winter still controls the roads. You realize this while standing atop the tower shortly after dawn, watching a lone rider struggle through the deep snow several miles away. The horse moves carefully, progress comes slowly. What might have been a brief journey during summer now requires patience, caution, and considerable determination. The sight serves as a useful reminder. Messages do not stop simply because the weather becomes difficult. In fact, communication becomes even more important. You remain on watch while pale sunlight spreads across the frozen countryside. Snow still covers the fields from the recent storm. Trees stand motionless beneath a sky washed in soft shades of grey and blue. The world feels clean, fresh, almost untouched, yet hidden beneath that beauty lies a practical challenge. People still need information. Lords need reports. Villages need warnings. Merchants need news. Military commanders need updates. And somewhere, someone is always waiting for a message that cannot wait until spring. By mid-morning, activity arrives at the tower. The rider you spotted earlier finally reaches the hill. His horse looks tired. So does he. Snow clings to boots, cloak, and beard. Tiny crystals sparkle whenever sunlight catches them. He dismounts carefully, stretches stiff legs, and offers a greeting before stepping inside. Warmth welcomes him immediately. The scent of wood smoke follows. For a few moments he simply stands near the fire, allowing feeling to return to his hands. Nobody rushes him. Everyone understands. Travel in winter demands respect. Medieval administrative records frequently reveal just how dependent governments and local authorities were upon messengers. Information moved at the speed of people, animals, weather, and roads. Every letter represented a physical journey. A remarkably physical journey. The messenger eventually produces several sealed documents from a leather pouch protected beneath his cloak. The contents do not concern you directly. They pass into the hands of those responsible for such matters. Till the arrival creates excitement. News has arrived, and news is valuable, particularly during winter. Conversation follows naturally. Where did he come from? What conditions exist farther south? Are roads passable? Has the river frozen? What rumors travel with him? Questions emerge from every direction. Answers follow. Some prove useful. Others sound suspiciously embellished. The messenger claims one village experienced drifts taller than a man. Someone immediately asks whether the man in question happened to be unusually short. Laughter follows. The messenger accepts the criticism gracefully. At least this time, near midday, you accompany another guard to inspect the tower's signalling equipment. A horn hangs beside the upper observation area. Nearby rests a stack of materials used for beacon fires should an emergency require them. The equipment appears simple, yet simplicity often works best. Throughout medieval Europe, various systems linked defensive sites through visual and audible signals. Exact methods differed by region, terrain, and local tradition. But the principle remained familiar. Notice danger quickly. Pass information onward. The tower forms one small part of a larger network. Even in winter, perhaps especially in winter, the sky remains clear throughout the afternoon. Visibility stretches for miles. You spend several hours scanning roads and villages below. Most activity moves slowly. Snow has transformed every journey into hard work. A cart crawls along a distant route. Several travelers walk rather than ride. Smoke rises steadily from chimneys across the countryside. Everyone seems focused on reaching shelter before darkness. One weathered carving near the observation platform catches your attention while passing time. Someone scratched it into the stone long ago. The image appears to depict a bird wearing what might be a crown, or perhaps an unusually ambitious chicken. The artist's intentions remain mysterious. Generations of guards have likely wondered the same thing. The carving survives. The explanation does not. Later writers occasionally mentioned graffiti appearing in castles, towers, churches, and city walls. Some marks carried religious significance, others recorded names. A surprising number seem to have existed simply because someone possessed a knife and spare time. Human nature leaves fingerprints everywhere. As daylight slowly shifts toward evening, another communication challenge becomes apparent. Distance. Even under ideal conditions, messages require time. A question that remains difficult to answer with precision concerns how quickly information travelled between smaller communities during severe winters. Conditions varied enormously. Weather, geography, local infrastructure, and political circumstances all influenced outcomes. The sources offer clues. Not certainly. One region might remain connected, another might feel completely cut off. The difference could depend on a single snowstorm. As sunset approaches, the messenger prepares to continue his journey. The decision earns several skeptical looks. The roads remain difficult. The temperature continues falling. The messenger shrugs. The documents still need delivering. Duty possesses its own momentum. You watch from above as he departs. Horse and rider gradually shrink into the snowy landscape. Eventually they become little more than a dark shape moving along a pale road. Then they disappear entirely. The tower returns to its usual rhythm. Observation, waiting, watching. Yet the visit lingers in your thoughts. For all its isolation, the tower is not disconnected from the wider world. Messages arrive, news arrives, travellers arrive. Information flows like a slow river through winter. Sometimes delayed, sometimes frozen, never completely stopped. Darkness arrives soon after. The sky clears once again, revealing countless stars above the countryside. Village lights appear below. Tiny points of gold scatter across the landscape. I'll begin another evening watch. The air feels The stone beneath your gloves feels cold. Far away, a lantern moves along a distant road. Another traveller, another journey, another message, perhaps. Or perhaps someone simply trying to reach home. The distinction hardly matters from this distance. What matters is movement. Proof that life continues beyond the tower walls. Hours later, when your shift finally ends, you descend toward the fire below. Warm air rises from the lower chamber. The smell of supper still lingers faintly in the room. Several guards discuss news brought by the messenger. Others debate weather prediction. No one truly knows what tomorrow will bring. Winter remains unpredictable. You settle beside the hearth and listen. The flames crackle softly. Outside, roads continue winding through forests, fields, and villages hidden beneath snow. Messengers still travel them. Riders still carry news. Communities still wait for word from distant places. And high above those frozen routes, the Watchtower continues its quiet role in a world connected not by wires or machines, but by courage, endurance, and people willing to carry messages through the cold. By the middle of winter, you know the tower almost as well as you know yourself. You know which stair creaks slightly under pressure. You know where drafts enter during strong winds. You know exactly which spot beside the hearth receives the most warmth. Most importantly, you know the people. That may be the greatest surprise of all. When you first arrived, the Watchtower seemed defined by stone walls, snow-covered landscapes, and endless observation. Now another reality becomes obvious. The tower is really made of personalities. Stone holds the structure together. People determine what life inside feels like. The morning begins much like countless others. The fire crackles, breakfast simmers. Outside, frost coats the countryside beneath a pale winter sky. Yet your attention drifts toward the men gathered around the hearth. There is the veteran. Every tower seems to have one. His beard contains more grey than brown. He rarely raises his voice. He possesses an opinion about everything and confidence in all of them, especially the questionable ones. He claims to remember storms nobody else remembers. He recalls visitors nobody else recalls. According to him, winters were always colder 20 years ago. Some traditions transcend centuries. Nearby sits the youngest guard. His enthusiasm remains largely intact despite the season's efforts. He asks questions constantly. He volunteers for tasks before fully understanding them. Occasionally this creates problems. More often it creates entertainment. The veteran frequently shakes his head. The younger guard frequently ignores him. Their relationship seems permanent, Documents describing medieval military communities often reveal surprising age differences among those serving together. Experience mattered, youth mattered, practical knowledge passed from one generation to another through daily interaction rather than formal instruction. You witness that process regularly. The tower functions partly as a workplace, partly as a classroom. After breakfast, observation duties begin. You climb to the upper platform alongside one of the quieter guards. He speaks less than the others. Some people mistake silence for absence of personality. They are usually wrong. During weeks of shared duty, you have learned otherwise. He notices details, tracks in distant snow, changes in weather patterns, small movements along roads. While others tell stories, he watches. While others debate, he observes. Every group contains different talents. The tower benefits from all of them. The morning passes peacefully. Sunlight glitters across frozen fields. Smoke rises from village chimneys. Ravens circle above distant woodland. Beside you, the quiet guard suddenly points toward a road near the horizon. At first you see nothing. Then you notice a cart. Tiny, almost invisible. His eyesight remains annoyingly impaired. You admit this. He appears pleased. A surprisingly personal detail emerges from some surviving letters written by medieval soldiers and officials. Many correspondences focus less on grand political events and more on everyday relationships, shared frustrations, and observations about companions. People have always been interested in people. History sometimes forgets that. Near midday, everyone gathers for a meal. Conversation fills the chamber. The veteran begins recounting a story involving a winter patrol from years earlier. Predictably, the tale improves with every retelling. The snowfall becomes deeper. The road becomes longer. The danger becomes greater. By the end, you suspect he may have personally defeated winter itself. Nobody interrupts. The performance is part of the entertainment. Across the room, another guard repairs clothing with remarkable skill. Torn sleeves, worn gloves, damaged cloaks. He handles them all with patient efficiency. In a different life, he might have become a tailor. Instead, he guards a watchtower. Life often chooses unexpected direction. The afternoon introduces another familiar figure, the complainer. Every shared community eventually acquires one. His complaints cover impressive territory: weather, food, stairs, boots, drafts, wood quality, snow depth, ale quality. He approaches the subject with dedication. Oddly enough, everyone likes him. Perhaps because his complaints are so predictable. Perhaps because he secretly enjoys the role. An amusing entry from a medieval account book records disciplinary action involving arguments among soldiers over matters that seem astonishingly trivial today. Human beings living in close quarters occasionally create conflict from almost nothing. The tower proves no exception. Fortunately, most disagreements remain harmless. By late afternoon, clouds gather overhead once more. The light softens. Long shadows stretch across the snow. Inside day, routines continue. One man sharpens tools. Another organizes supplies. Someone else cleans equipment near the fire. None of these tasks appear dramatic. All of them matter. The tower survives through accumulated effort, not heroic moments. As daylight fades, the atmosphere changes subtly. Evening encourages conversation. People drift closer to the hearth, work slows, stories return. The younger guard asks questions again. Many questions, perhaps too many questions. The veteran answers, some invents answers for others. The distinction occasionally becomes difficult to detect. Laughter follows. The fire pops suddenly, sending sparks upward. For a moment, everyone watches the flames. Comfort settles across the room. The available evidence cannot tell us exactly what friendships looked like inside every watchtower. Personal relationships rarely leave detailed records, yet scattered references suggest bonds formed naturally wherever people shared hardships, responsibilities, and long stretches of time together. The conclusion feels reasonable. Winter encourages familiarity. You cannot spend months inside a small tower without learning people's habits. You learn who snores, who rises earliest, Who tells the same story repeatedly? Who always sits in the same place near the fire? You learn who becomes cheerful after a good meal, who becomes silent during storms, who secretly saves small treats for difficult days. A faded mark near the hearth illustrates this perfectly. Someone long ago carved several initials into a wooden beam. The names themselves are forgotten. The individuals have vanished into history, yet the mark remains, proof that relationships existed here, proof that people mattered to one another, proof that the tower once contained lives as real and complicated as those around you now. Night arrives fully. The countryside beyond the walls disappears beneath darkness. Only scattered village lights remain visible through observation openings. Inside, however, warmth persists. Voices rise and fall. Stories continue. The veteran begins another tale despite clear evidence that everyone has already heard it before. No one stops him. The younger guard pretends surprise at key moments. The performance proceeds exactly as expected. Some rituals require no improvement. Eventually people begin preparing for sleep. One by one they climb the staircase toward the upper chamber. The fire burns lower. Shadows lengthen. You linger for a few moments beside the hearth before following. The tower feels different tonight. Not warmer, not larger, simply more familiar. The stone walls remain cold. The winter remains long. Yet the people around you have transformed the tower into something more than a defensive structure. A community. Small, imperfect, occasionally annoying, yet undeniably human, and during a medieval winter, that may have been one of the most valuable comforts available. One morning you wake to the sound of claws on stone, not a threatening sound, just unexpected. You sit upright beneath your blanket and listen. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch. The noise comes from somewhere above. A few moments later, the mystery solves itself. A raven appears outside one of the upper openings. The bird tilts its head sideways and stares into the tower. With what seems like deep personal judgment, its black feathers shine against the pale winter sky. The raven appears entirely unimpressed by human civilization. You find this strangely believable. By now, winter has settled into its long middle stretch. The season no longer feels new. Snow blankets the countryside, frost coats the tower during most mornings, as the routines of daily life continue steadily. Yet the animals around the tower remain a constant source of interest, perhaps because they break the monotony, perhaps because they belong to a different world. After dressing, you climb toward the observation platform. The raven remains perched nearby. It watches. You watch back. The contest lasts several seconds. Then the bird flies away without explanation. A victory for neither side. The countryside beyond gleams beneath fresh sunlight. Snow reflects brilliant white across fields and hills. Dark forests stand in sharp contrast against the brightness. The morning feels peaceful, almost delicate. Then a flock of birds rises suddenly from distant trees. Hundreds of dark shapes swirl against the sky before settling again farther away. Movement, life, a reminder that winter has not emptied the landscape. Medieval people lived far closer to animals than most modern individuals. Domestic animals shared daily routines. Wild creatures occupied nearby forests, fields, and waterways. Many species that seem unusual today would have been familiar sights. The tower offers an excellent place to observe them. Hours later, while standing watch, you spot several deer moving along the edge of a woodland. Their coats appear darker against the snow. They travel carefully, conserving energy during the difficult season. The sight feels almost graceful. No sudden movements, no wasted effort, just quiet persistence. You understand the feeling. Winter encourages efficiency in everyone. Toward midday, another visitor appears. A dog, not one belonging to the tower. This animal emerges from a nearby road and wanders up the hill. Its thick coat carries patches of snow. It pauses near the entrance and looks hopefully toward the smell of cooking drifting from within. A reasonable strategy. The guards greet the newcomer warmly. Food appears. The dog remains. On arrangement is reached. Historical household accounts and village records frequently mention dogs serving practical roles as companions, guards, hunters, and herders. Yet many references also suggest simple affection. People enjoyed keeping animals around. That fact feels unsurprising, especially during winter. The dog spends most of the afternoon near the hearth. It sleeps, occasionally wakes, accepts attention, then returns to sleeping. An admirable philosophy. The younger guard claims the animal has chosen the tower permanently. The veteran predicts it will leave after exhausting available food sources. Both arguments possess merit. Outside, the day continues quietly. A pair of crows investigates tracks near the base of the hill. Far beyond them, movement appears along a frozen stream. You narrow your eyes. 3 figures. Not 4. Then you realize they are not people at all. Wolves. The animals move across the snow with effortless confidence. Even from a distance, their progress seems smooth and deliberate. You watch until they disappear into woodland shadows. The sight leaves an impression. Chronicles from various medieval regions occasionally mention wolves, particularly during severe winters. Their reputation often exceeded their actual threat, yet they occupied an important place in both practical experience and folklore. Few creatures captured human imagination quite so effectively. Back inside the tower, discussion begins almost immediately after the sighting. Everyone has a wolf story. Every single person, the veteran, possesses through. At minimum, one account involves laws. Livestock. Another involves a hunting party. The third grows increasingly dramatic each time it is told. Nobody objects. The story has become a communal tradition. A curious little mystery concerns how many animal tales recorded in medieval sources were literal descriptions, and how many gradually absorbed elements of folklore over time. The boundary between observation and storytelling could become surprisingly flexible. Humans enjoy improving narratives. Animals often become characters within them. The afternoon drifts onward. Clouds gather briefly before moving away again. Light shifts across the snowy landscape. The dog continues sleeping near the fire with impressive commitment. At some point, you become slightly jealous. During observation duty, another creature captures your attention. A fox! The animal appears unexpectedly near a distant hedgerow. Its reddish coat stands out vividly against the snow. It pauses frequently while moving, listening carefully before continuing. The fox seems perfectly adapted to winter. Silent, patient, alert. For several minutes, you forget everything else. Then the animal vanishes. Gone, as quickly as it appeared. One forgotten detail preserved in a handful of medieval records involves people feeding birds during difficult winters. Whether motivated by practicality, habit, religious feeling, or simple kindness, some communities maintained surprisingly close relationships with local wildlife. Not everyone viewed nature solely as something to conquer. Sometimes people simply coexisted.
Roaches are.
The sky turns pale gold near the horizon. Long shadows stretch across frozen fields. Smoke rises from village chimneys in distant columns. The raven returns. Of course it does. The bird lands near the same spot as before and resumes its inspection of tower affairs. You suspect it believes itself responsible for supervising the entire region. Perhaps it is.
No one can prove otherwise.
The dog notices the raven and barks once. The raven remains unimpressed. The balance of power appears unchanged. Darkness eventually settles across the countryside. The animals disappear into forests, fields, villages, and hidden places beyond sight. Yet traces remain. Tracks in snow. Distant calls, memories of movement. You descend toward the fire as night arrives. The dog has relocated closer to the hearth. The raven is nowhere to be seen. Wolves continue roaming somewhere beyond the hills. Foxes continue hunting. Deer continue searching for food beneath winter branches. Life persists in every direction. The tower may feel isolated at times, but tonight you understand something important. You are not alone on this frozen landscape. Countless creatures share the season with you, some visible, some hidden, all enduring the same winter beneath the same cold stars. The first cough seems harmless. No one pays much attention to it. Winter has a way of drying throats and irritating lungs. People spend months breathing smoke from hearth fires. Cold air stings the chest during observation duty. A cough here and there hardly feels unusual. Yet over the next few days the sound returns, again and again. One evening, while sitting near the fire, you notice the younger guard rubbing his hands together more than usual. His face appears slightly flushed despite the cold chamber. I insist he feels fine. Naturally, nobody ever feels ill at first. The veteran glances at him across the fire and says nothing. That silence speaks volumes. The next morning, the younger guard remains in bed longer than usual. Now everyone notices. The sleeping chamber feels quieter without his constant questions. The straw mattress rustles as he shifts beneath blankets. A wooden cup of water sits beside him. The tower continues functioning. Observation duties continue. Meals continue. Winter continues, yet a subtle concern settles over the building. Illness always changes the atmosphere. Even before anyone says so aloud, you climb to the upper platform shortly after dawn. Frost coats the stone beneath your boots. The countryside stretches away beneath pale sunlight and lingering snow. Everything appears normal. The irony feels almost unfair. The landscape remains peaceful while a small problem grows inside the tower. Many excavations of medieval settlements have revealed evidence of frequent health challenges. Cold weather, limited nutrition, crowded living conditions, and seasonal hardships often created conditions where sickness could spread more easily than anyone would have preferred. You do not need archaeology to understand that. You merely need to share a tower during winter. The younger guard misses the midday meal. That attracts attention. No one willingly misses food here. The veteran eventually carries a bowl upstairs and returns a few minutes later wearing a thoughtful expression. Not worried, not reassured. Somewhere in between, the afternoon drifts onward. Snow melts slightly on sunlit slopes. Water drips from portions of the tower before freezing again when shadows return. Ravens circle above distant trees. Life outside proceeds normally. Inside, conversation grows more subdued. Someone adds extra wood to the fire. Someone else checks blankets. Nobody discusses it directly. Not yet. A small wooden shelf near the hearth contains several items that pass for remedies. Dried herbs, small bundles of plants. Containers holding mixtures whose exact contents remain open to interpretation. One pouch smells strongly of mint. Another smells considerably less embodying. The tower's collection has accumulated gradually over the years. A little from one traveller, a little from another. Bits of practical knowledge mixed with local tradition. By evening, the younger guard develops a fever. The situation becomes official. Now acknowledges it. A woman from a nearby village is summoned the following morning. She occasionally assists families throughout the region when illness appears. Whether you call her healer, herbalist, wise woman, or something else depends largely upon local custom. Either way, people trust her. That matters. The roads remain passable enough for the journey. The weather cooperates. For once, during the night, you take your turn on watch. The sky remains clear. Stars shine brightly above the frozen countryside. Yet your thoughts drift repeatedly toward the tower below. Strange, really? A few weeks earlier, you barely knew the younger guard. Now his absence feels noticeable. Winter communities form connections quickly, particularly when escape is impossible. Toward dawn, a fox crosses a distant field beneath moonlight. The sight briefly distracts you before disappearing into darkness. The world continues. It always does. Morning arrives cold and bright. The healer reaches the tower before midday. She carries a basket. Everyone seems interested in the basket. The contents remain mysterious. Her examination takes place upstairs. Voices drift occasionally through the floorboards, though individual words remain impossible to hear. The waiting feels longer than it actually is. Eventually she descends. Her verdict appears cautiously optimistic. The younger guard requires rest, warmth, food, time, no dramatic intervention, no miracle cure, just patience. Surviving medical texts from the medieval period contain an astonishing mixture of practical observations, inherited traditions and classical theories, and treatments that range from surprisingly sensible to deeply puzzling. Humanity has always done its best with the knowledge available. Results varied. The healer prepares several mixtures from herbs carried in a basket. One smells pleasant. Another smells powerful enough to discourage illness through inundation alone. The veteran examines both with suspicion. No one asks for volunteers. As the day progresses, the tower settles into a new routine. Duties are redistributed. Observation shifts are adjusted. Meals continue arriving upstairs. Life adapts. Communities often do. One old tale associated with the region concerns a dried plant hung above doorways to ward off winter sickness. Nobody remembers exactly when the tradition began. Nobody agrees on whether it worked, yet someone quietly places such a bundle near the entrance that evening. Just in case. No one comments. No one removes it. Some customs survive because certainty is unavailable. The younger guard improves slightly over the next several days, not dramatically, but enough. His appetite returns first. Everyone takes this as is he. Correctly. Soon he begins asking questions again. The veteran immediately regrets this development. At least according to his public statements. Privately, you suspect he is relieved. The evidence left behind by ordinary medieval people often grows frustratingly faint when it comes to personal emotions. Account books record expenses, inventories record possessions, official documents record obligations. Friendship rarely receives paperwork, yet moments like this make certain conclusions feel reasonable. People worried about one another. People missed one another. People felt relief when companions recovered, not because records command us to believe it, because human beings generally behave that way. Several evenings later, the younger guard finally rejoins everyone beside the hearth. The event receives surprisingly enthusiastic approval. Someone offers him food. Someone else offers advice. The veteran offers criticism disguised as advice. The younger guard appears delighted by all of it. The fire crackles softly. Snow falls outside once again. Nothing about the tower has changed, and yet everything feels slightly brighter. Perhaps illness reminds people how much they depend upon one another. Perhaps recovery does the same. You sit beside the hearth watching flames dance across stone walls while conversation gradually returns to normal. The winter remains long. The roads remain cold. The tower remains isolated. Yet tonight the laughter sounds stronger than it did a few days ago. And in a place like this, that counts for a great deal. The longest nights arrive quietly. There is no announcement, no ceremony. One evening simply feels darker than the last. Then another follows. Soon you realize that winter has carried the tower into that peculiar part of the season when darkness seems to occupy more hours than daylight. The effect reaches everyone, even those who pretend otherwise. Tonight the wind has faded completely. Snow rests undisturbed across the countryside. Clouds hide the stars, leaving the world outside wrapped in a soft grey gloom. Inside the tower, the fire becomes the centre of existence. Orange light flickers across stone walls. Shadows sway gently. The scent of burning wood fills the chamber. People naturally gather closer. Conversation comes more easily during nights like this. Perhaps because darkness encourages stories. Perhaps because human beings have always preferred companionship when surrounded by uncertainty. You settle near the hearth after the evening meal. The younger guard has recovered enough to resume asking questions at an alarming rate. The veteran appears resigned, a dangerous sigh. Resignation usually means a story is coming. Sure enough, it arrives. The tale begins with a traveller crossing a frozen road many winters ago. Before long, mysterious lights appear, then strange sounds, then an abandoned chapel. the details become increasingly dramatic. No one interrupts. That would spoil the fun. The tower has entered storytelling weather. Many medieval communities possessed rich traditions of folklore, local legends, seasonal beliefs, and oral storytelling. Long winter evenings provided ideal opportunities to share them. Before books became widely available, stories served as entertainment, education, memory, and social glue. You can understand why the fire crackles, snow drifts against the walls, the setting practically demands a tale. The veteran reaches the most dramatic portion of his story. Naturally, this is when someone points out an inconsistency. The interruption sparks debate. Now, several versions of the same legend emerge simultaneously. Apparently, no two people remember it the same way. The argument remains friendly. Mostly, the younger guard insists the mysterious lights were spirits. The quiet guard suggests smugglers. Someone else proposes travelers carrying lanterns. A fourth person suspects the entire story originated because somebody wandered into a ditch after consuming too much ale. That explanation receives strong support. The truth remains unavailable. The story survives. Not every mystery requires solving. Later, while adding wood to the fire, you notice a small object hanging from a beam above the hearth. A carved wooden charm. You have seen it before, but never asked about it. Tonight, curiosity wins. The answer proves surprisingly complicated. 3 people provide 3 different explanations. One claims it protects against bad luck. Another says it commemorates a former guard. The veteran insists it prevents chimney problems. The confidence of his answer immediately reduces its credibility. No one truly knows. The charm simply exists. It has existed for years, perhaps longer. A number of medieval objects discovered by archaeologists continue raising questions because their exact purpose has vanished from memory. People once understood them perfectly. Centuries later, certainty becomes much harder to achieve. Time erases instruction. The object remains. The explanation disappears. The evening continues. Outside, darkness presses against the tower windows. The world beyond feels distant and hidden. Forests vanish entirely. Roads disappear beneath shadow. The fire remains bright. Only the voices remain clear. One guard begins describing a village custom involving bells rung during certain winter nights. Another remembers hearing of a neighbouring settlement that left candles burning near windows during a seasonal feast. Traditions vary from place to place. Stories travel farther than certainty. The younger guard listens intently. The veteran embellishes freely. Everyone seems satisfied. Near the staircase stands a chair nobody uses. You notice it again. Every tower possesses odd little mysteries. This one happens to involve furniture. The chair remains sturdy, useful, perfectly functional, yet nobody sits there. When asked why, the answers become wonderfully inconsistent. Someone claims a former captain preferred it. Someone else insists the chair squeaks too loudly. A third explanation involves luck. A fourth involves an argument nobody clearly remembers. The chair remains empty. Its reputation persists. An especially human aspect of historical life involves the survival of small habits and superstitions whose original meanings faded long before the habits themselves disappeared. People inherit customs, then forget why, yet continue following them anyway. The fire burns lower. More wood is added. Sparks drift upward. The atmosphere grows calmer. Stories soften. Voices become quieter. At some point, the conversation turns toward dreams. That subject proves nearly as dangerous as politics. Everyone has an opinion. One guard believes dreams reveal hidden truths. Another insists they result from poor suppers. The veteran somehow argues both positions simultaneously. An impressive achievement. The available sources from medieval Europe reveal a wide range of attitudes toward dreams, omens, signs, and unusual experiences. Learned scholars, clergy, villagers, travellers, and soldiers often interpreted such things differently depending on background and circumstance. Human beings have always searched for meaning. particularly during long nights. Outside, snow begins falling again. Very lightly, tiny flakes drift through the darkness beyond the tower walls. You notice them only when they cross the faint glow escaping from a narrow opening. The sight feels peaceful. The younger guard finally grows tired. A remarkable event. One by one, people begin preparing for sleep. Blankets await upstairs. Boots are gathered. Lanterns are adjusted. The fire remains active but smaller now. Its warmth settles into the room like a final conversation. Before climbing the staircase, you glance once more toward the unused chair. It remains empty. Naturally. Perhaps someone originally had a reason. Perhaps no reason ever existed. Either possibility feels equally plausible. The tower contains many such mysteries. Not grand mysteries, small ones, human ones, the sort that accumulate wherever people spend years living together. You climb toward the sleeping chamber while snow falls softly outside. The old tower creaks occasionally in the cold. Shadows linger in corners, somewhere below. The fire continues glowing faintly. The world beyond the walls has disappeared into darkness, yet the tower feels strangely warm tonight. Not because the air is warmer, not because the season has changed, but because stories, beliefs, habits, and shared memories have filled the empty spaces between stone walls. And during the deepest part of winter, those things can feel almost as important as the fire itself. The sign appears shortly after sunrise. At first, it seems insignificant, just a thin line crossing fresh snow on a distant road. You almost miss it. The morning has been unusually calm. Clouds drift lazily across the sky. Frost sparkles on rooftops far below. The countryside lies quiet beneath a pale winter sun. Then the quiet guard notices the tracks. Of course he does. Then notices everything. You follow his pointing finger toward the southern road. From this distance, details remain difficult to distinguish. Yet something definitely interrupted the smooth surface of the snow during the night. A trail. Several trails, perhaps. The tracks move toward a wooded area before disappearing beneath trees. You study them for a long moment. The sight awakens something that boredom and routine often suppress. Curiosity. The tower exists for moments like this. Not every day brings news. Not every day brings travelers. Yet every unusual detail deserves attention. You continue watching throughout the morning. The tracks remain visible whenever sunlight strikes them at the proper angle. Questions begin forming naturally. Who made them? When? Why travel at night? The answers remain distant. Winter landscapes reveal evidence easily. Snow records movement with remarkable honesty. A person crossing a field leaves a signature behind. So does a horse. So does a cart. The countryside becomes a vast temporary document. Nothing stays hidden for long. During the midday meal, conversation revolves around the tracks. Naturally, the veteran proposes merchants delayed by weather. The younger guard suggests smugglers. Someone else suggests hunters. The dog sleeping beside the hearth contributes nothing useful. As usual, the debate continues anyway. A messenger arriving from a nearby settlement provides partial clarification. Several traders apparently passed through the region during the previous evening, attempting to reach shelter before another forecasted snowfall. That explanation satisfies most people. Not everyone. The younger guard remains deeply attached to the smuggler theory. Some mysteries are simply more entertaining. By afternoon, the sky darkens unexpectedly. Clouds gather from the west. A sharp wind returns. You climb toward the observation platform carrying a cloak wrapped tightly around your shoulders. The air feels different, colder, more alert. Weather changes often influence human behavior. Roads that seem manageable in the morning can become hazardous by evening. Travelers hurry, villagers prepare, guards pay closer attention. The entire landscape adjusts. Standing atop the tower, you scan the countryside carefully. Movement appears near the forest. This time you see it clearly. Several riders, 4 perhaps, maybe 5. Distance makes certainty difficult. They travel steadily along a narrow route winding through snowy hills. Their pace suggests familiarity with the terrain. Nothing alarming. Yet nothing ordinary either. You continue watching. The The riders disappear briefly behind a ridge before reappearing farther north. Eventually they pass beyond sight. The encounter remains uneventful. Still, it occupies discussion for much of the evening. One reason watchtowers existed across many regions involved uncertainty. Most days proved peaceful. The challenge lay in recognizing the rare day that would not be. Vigilance required patience and judgment. A rider might be a merchant, a traveller, a messenger, or something else entirely. The distinction mattered. As daylight fades, another task demands attention. The signal horn requires inspection. Cold weather affects everything eventually. Leather dries, wood contracts, metal behaves differently in freezing temperatures. You accompany another guard to examine the equipment. The horn hangs near the observation area, protected from the worst of the weather. Its surface feels cold beneath your fingertips. A blast from the instrument echoes across the hills. The sound carries surprisingly far. Even the dog downstairs reacts not positively. The test proves successful. The dog eventually forgives everyone involved. An old account from a frontier region describes how warning signals occasionally travelled astonishing distances through chains of watch posts and settlements. Exactly how efficient such networks remained under difficult conditions is harder to determine. Different landscapes created different challenges. A signal crossing open hills might travel quickly. Dense forests created other problem. Mountains created more. The evening meal arrives, accompanied by growing wind outside. Snow begins falling again, though lightly. Inside, the atmosphere remains comfortable. The younger guard has developed a new theory involving the riders. He now believes they were secret envoys carrying important political information. No evidence supports this conclusion. None whatsoever. The lack of evidence seems irrelevant. The veteran encourages the theory briefly, then expands it into something even more absurd. The resulting story includes hidden treasure. Naturally, soon everyone contributes additional details. The riders become more mysterious. The treasure becomes larger. The credibility becomes smaller. The process entertains everyone. That appears sufficient. After supper, you climb the tower once more for an evening watch. Darkness settles gradually across the countryside. Village lights appear one by one, roads fade into shadow, snow reflects faint moonlight beneath breaks in the cloud cover. The landscape looks peaceful, yet peaceful does not mean empty. That lesson has become familiar. People continue traveling, animals continue moving, events continue unfolding beyond the horizon. Most remain unseen. A single lantern appears far away. Then another. Perhaps a farmhouse, perhaps travellers. Distance conceals certainty, so you remain watching for some time. The wind brushes against your cloak. Frost forms slowly along exposed stone. Somewhere in the darkness, a fox barks briefly before falling silent again. The sound carries clearly through cold air, then nothing, only stillness, only winter. Eventually your shift ends. You descend toward the lower chamber where firelight spills across the floor. Warm air greets you. The smell of wood smoke and stew lingers pleasantly in the room. Several guards remain awake. Conversation continues quietly. The younger guard has not abandoned the treasure theory. No one expected him to. You sit beside the hearth and extend your hands toward the flames. Outside, snow continues falling gently over roads, forests, and hidden tracks. Travelers move through the darkness. Villages prepare for another cold night. The tower watches over all of it, not because danger is certain, because uncertainty is, and in a medieval winter, that difference means everything. The first crack appears near the doorway. It is not large. In fact, you almost miss it. A thin line runs through a section of mortar between two stones. During summer, nobody would have noticed. During winter, however, even the smallest imperfection attracts attention. Cold has a talent for finding weaknesses. You discover the crack shortly after dawn while carrying firewood inside. The morning air feels sharp enough to sting your lungs. Frost covers the ground. A pale sun hangs low above the horizon. The tower has survived many winters. Even so, every season leaves its mark. You crouch beside the wall and run a gloved finger near the damaged section. Tiny grains of mortar crumble loose. Nothing serious. Not yet. Still, wood spreads quickly.
By breakfast, everyone knows.
The younger guard suggests the tower might collapse. The veteran suggests the younger guard stop helping disasters grow larger. The discussion ends there. Mostly, the tower remains sturdy, yet winter maintenance becomes the unofficial theme of the zoo. Life inside an old building requires constant attention. Wood warps, roof coverings loosen, hinges stiffen, water freezes in inconvenient places. Small problems prefer becoming large ones when ignored. The Watchtower understands this principle very well. After the morning meal, several guards begin inspecting different parts of the structure. You join them. The staircase receives attention first. Generations of boots have worn smooth sections into the stone. One step feels slightly loose beneath pressure. Another collects moisture whenever snow blows through nearby openings. Nothing dramatic, just another item on a very long list. The veteran carries a wooden mallet and a collection of tools that appear older than some kingdoms. Every few minutes he mutters something disapproving toward the building. The building remains unmoved by criticism. Sunlight reaches the upper platform by late morning. Thin layers of ice sparkle along exposed edges. You spend some time clearing snow from areas where drifting accumulation has become excessive. The work proves surprisingly tiring. Snow looks lighter than it feels, especially when lifting it repeatedly. A wooden beam near the observation level attracts additional concern. Tiny gaps have appeared where different materials meet. Nothing dangerous, nothing urgent. Yet everyone prefers addressing small issues before they become memorable stories. Near noon, you discover evidence of previous repairs. A section of timber bears old tool marks. Someone long ago patched a damaged area using techniques that still hold today. The repair has weathered countless storms. You pause for a moment. The person who made those repairs is long gone. The work remains. That thought feels strangely comforting. The tower contains layers of effort left behind by people who never expected future generations to know their names. Their contribution survives Aoi. The younger guard spends much of the afternoon carrying supplies and asking questions. He wants to know who built the tower. Nobody knows. He wants to know exactly how old it is.
Nobody knows that either.
Several theories emerge immediately. Naturally, one person claims the tower predates a nearby village. Another insists both were constructed around the same period. The veteran offers a date with tremendous confidence. No evidence accompanies it. The younger guard seems impressed regardless. The tower keeps its secrets. A faded symbol carved into one interior stone only deepens the mystery. The mark resembles a cross from certain angles. From others, it resembles something entirely different. Nobody agrees on its purpose. A mason's mark, perhaps a personal signature. A protective symbol, or simply a scratch that acquired meaning later. The stone remains silent. Outside, the weather shifts during the afternoon. Clouds gather gradually across the sky. Wind returns from the north carrying fresh, cold air. The change arrives as quickly as... By the time you finish clearing another section of snow, your fingers feel stiff despite thick gloves. Everyone retreats indoors more frequently. The fire becomes increasingly attractive. While warming yourself beside the hearth, you notice another example of ongoing maintenance. A cooking pot has developed a small crack near one handle. Someone repaired it using metal fastenings years earlier. The repair looks awkward. It also works. Life in the tower often follows that philosophy. Perfection remains or function matters more. A worn chest near the wall displays similar evidence. Its lid no longer closes exactly as intended. Additional pieces of wood have been added over time. The result appears slightly crooked. The chest continues serving its purpose. Nobody complains. Too much. Toward evening, A stronger wind begins rattling parts of the structure. Wooden shutters tap softly against their fittings. The sound echoes through the tower. Tap, tap, tap. One guard climbs outside briefly to secure a troublesome section. Everyone watches from inside. Nobody volunteers to assist. The repair succeeds. The guard returns looking extremely pleased with himself. And extremely cold. The fire welcomes him immediately. As darkness settles, the tower seems almost alive. Not in a supernatural sense, in a practical one. The building creaks, settles, responds to weather. The sounds have become familiar companions throughout winter. You know which noises belong to beams, which belong to doors, which belong to wind. The dog near the hearth seems equally familiar with them. It sleeps through everything, an admirable skill. After supper, conversation drifts toward repairs people have witnessed elsewhere. Stories emerge involving collapsed sheds, damaged bridges, stubborn gates, and roofs that surrendered dramatically during storms. Each story grows slightly more dramatic during retelling. Some traditions remain reliable. The younger guard asks whether towers ever fall. An uncomfortable silence follows. Eventually the veteran answers. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes. The room grows thoughtful for a moment. Then someone changes the subject. Wisely, later that night, you climb toward the observation platform for a final look across the countryside. Clouds cover most of the stars. Snow reflects faint light from somewhere beyond the horizon. The tower stands firm beneath your feet. Cold, weathered, scarred, reliable. Every crack tells a story. Every repair tells another. Winter has tested the structure repeatedly. So have decades before this one. Yet here it remains. Watching roads, watching forests, watching the passing century. You descend toward the warmth below, feeling oddly grateful for the old building. It may not be comfortable. It may never be comfortable, but it continues standing, and during a medieval winter, that is a quality worth appreciating. The first sign of celebration arrives in the form of food. That seems appropriate. Most good celebrations begin that way. You notice it during breakfast when an extra bundle appears on the storage shelf near the hearth. The contents remain covered, but the reaction from everyone else immediately attracts attention. Smiles, raised eyebrows, suspiciously cheerful expression. Something unusual is happening. The younger guard attempts to investigate. He is stopped almost immediately. The veteran guards the bundle with surprising determination. This only increases curiosity. Outside, winter continues as always. Snow blankets the countryside. Frost coats rooftops and fields. A cold breeze drifts across the hill where the tower stands watch. Inside, however, anticipation has arrived. The season's long rhythm is about to change. Not dramatically, not extravagantly, just enough. You discover the reason later that morning. A seasonal feast day approaches, nothing on the scale of a royal banquet, nothing likely to attract musicians, nobles, or grand processions. Just a small winter celebration observed by people who have spent months battling cold weather, routine, and one another's company, which is reason enough. The mood improves almost immediately. Even chores feel lighter. Snow clearing becomes less tedious. Firewood carrying inspires fewer complaints. Observation duties proceed with unusual enthusiasm. The younger guard even volunteers for additional work. Everyone suspects he is attempting to earn access to whatever hides beneath the cloth covering the mysterious bundle. His strategy remains transparent. By midday, preparations become visible. Additional logs are stacked beside the hearth. The cooking area receives extra attention. Wooden bowls are cleaned more carefully than usual. The tower is preparing itself in a modest way, the same way ordinary people have prepared for special occasions throughout history, not with luxury. With effort, a set of wooden cups stored carefully in a chest emerges for the occasion. You have seen them before, but rarely in use. Unlike everyday drinking vessels, these cups bear simple carved decorations around their rims, leaves, birds, geometric patterns, nothing elaborate, yet noticeably special. The carvings have been worn smooth by many hands, many winters, many gatherings. You find yourself wondering how many celebrations they have witnessed. The answer is impossible to know. The afternoon brings another surprise. A villager arrives carrying a small basket as a gift from a nearby settlement. The contents are humble but welcome. Fresh bread, a little honey, a few preserved apples. The younger guard looks as though someone has delivered treasure. Perhaps they have. Winter changes definitions. The visitor remains only briefly before returning home. Roads remain cold and daylight remains limited. Even short journeys require planning this time of year. Before leaving, the villager exchanges news and stories with those near the fire. Laughter follows. Promises of future visits follow as well. Then the door closes. Cold air slips inside briefly. Warmth returns. The tower settles back into anticipation. As daylight begins fading, the feast preparations truly begin. The covered bundle is finally revealed. Smoked meat. Not a huge amount. Not enough to feed an army. Enough to transform an ordinary meal into something memorable. The reaction borders on reverence. The veteran nods approvingly. The younger guard looks ready to compose poetry. The fire burns brightly while food cooks slowly. Rich aromas spread through the tower. Wood smoke mingles with the scent of roasting meat. Herbs simmer in a nearby pot. The smell reaches every corner. Even the dog becomes unusually attentive. Particularly the dog outside. Twilight settles across the snowy countryside. Village lights appear one by one in the distance. Thin streams of smoke rise from chimneys before disappearing into the darkening sky. Elsewhere, families are likely preparing celebrations of their own. The thought feels comforting. The tower may stand apart from surrounding communities, yet it remains connected to them. By roads, by stories, by seasons. Night finally arrives. The feast begins. Wooden bowls pass from hand to hand. Bread is shared. Honey appears in small quantities. The smoked meat receives the sort of attention usually reserved for important diplomatic negotiations. Conversation grows louder, not rowdy, just happy. People tell stories they've already told many times before. Somehow they remain entertaining. The younger guard attempts to retell one himself. The result contains several inaccuracies. The veteran corrects every single one. A familiar tradition, one old lantern hanging near the hearth receives special attention tonight. Someone has polished its metal frame. The warm light reflects softly from nearby walls. The lantern has been part of the tower longer than anyone currently living there, at least according to local rumour. Whether that claim is true remains uncertain. Nobody can remember when the story began. The lantern simply belongs, like the tower, like the chair nobody uses, like the mysterious carving up. Some objects become part of a place's identity. Later, songs appear, quiet songs, simple song, the sort remembered imperfectly and shared anyway. A few verses survive, others fade. Someone forgets a line, someone invents a replacement. The song continues. No one seems concerned. The fire crackles steadily. Snow taps gently against the walls. Warmth fills the chamber. For a little while, winter feels less severe. Not because temperatures have changed, because spirits have. A small game emerges after the meal. It involves guessing answers to questions about local landmarks, neighbouring villages, and historical events. Accuracy proves optional. Confidence proves abundant. The younger guard answers first and often. The results vary dramatically. The dog sleeps through the competition. A wise choice. Hours pass. The celebration remains modest from beginning to end. No grand spectacle occurs. No miracle interrupts the evening. No famous visitor arrives bearing gifts. Just food, stories, songs, companionship. Yet perhaps that is enough. You realize something while watching firelight flicker across familiar faces. The feast matters precisely because ordinary days are so ordinary. Months of routine make small joys feel larger. A little honey tastes sweeter. A song sounds richer. A shared meal becomes memorable. Eventually the celebration winds down. The fire burns lower. Voices soften. People begin gathering blankets and preparing for sleep. You linger beside the hearth for a final moment. Outside, winter still covers the land. Roads remain frozen. Forests remain dark. The season remains forever unfinished. Yet tonight the tower feels warmer than it has in weeks. Not because of thicker walls, not because of larger fires, because for a few precious hours, a lonely watchtower became something more than a place of duty. It became a place of celebration, and that memory may carry everyone a little farther through the winter ahead. A few days after the celebration, reality returns, not cruelly. Simply inevitably, winter has a habit of collecting debts. The extra food enjoyed during the feast came from somewhere. The additional firewood burned during long evenings came from somewhere too. Every comfortable moment carries a cost measured in supplies. You notice the change during morning inventory. The veteran kneels beside a stack of grain sacks near the wall. One by one he checks their contents. His expression remains calm, yet slightly thoughtful. That alone attracts attention. When a man who has survived countless winters becomes thoughtful, other people start counting things as well. The numbers are not alarming, not yet. Still, the supplies look smaller than they did several weeks ago. The pile of firewood no longer reaches the mark on the wall where it stood earlier in the season. Barrels feel lighter. Shelves contain more empty space. Winter has been eating steadily. The tower has been eating steadily too. Outside, snow continues covering the countryside. The landscape remains beautiful from above. Fields gleam beneath pale sunlight. Forests rest beneath frosted branches. Beauty does not refill storage rooms. You spend part of the morning helping reorganize provisions. Everything receives a place. Everything receives attention. Loose grain is gathered carefully. Small scraps of usable material are preserved. Nothing is wasted casually. The process feels almost ceremonial. The younger guard asks whether supplies are running low. The veteran answers with a long pause. Then he says they are running lower. A meaningful distinction. The tower is not in danger. The tower is simply becoming more aware of mathematics. A shelf near the hearth once held 3 small wheels of cheese. Now it holds one. No one complained. The cheese accomplished its purpose. The empty spaces merely remind everyone that winter remains unfinished. As the morning progresses, discussion turns toward future deliveries. Roads have improved slightly since the worst storms passed. Travelers move more frequently now. Communication with nearby settlements has become easier. Everyone hopes additional supplies will arrive soon. Hope costs nothing. Conveniently, the dog receives a smaller scrap of food than usual during the midday meal. It notices immediately. The look of betrayal on its face deserves preservation in historical archives. Several guards apologize. The dog remains unconvinced. An old chest near the wall contains emergency provisions. The chest stays closed. No one suggests opening it. Merely knowing it exists provides reassurance. Its presence changes the atmosphere, like seeing a reserve candle during a power outage. Comforting, even if unused. By afternoon, clouds drift across the sky. A cold breeze returns from the north. You take your position on the observation platform and study the roads below. Movement remains sparse. A cart appears in the distance. Then another approaches the tour. Both continue toward villages farther south. The sight prompts another round of speculation. Could one of them be carrying supplies? Perhaps. Could they simply be transporting ordinary goods? Also, perhaps, winter encourages curiosity, particularly when inventories are involved. The younger guard begins calculating how much food remains. His arithmetic changes several times during the process. The final answer appears dramatically worse than reality. Everyone ignores it. Wisely, a small argument develops over dried peas, not the peas themselves, their quantity. One person insists there are fewer than expected. Another claims the count remains accurate. The disagreement lasts 10 minutes. Eventually the peas are counted. The peas win. A detail preserved in various medieval household accounts reveals how carefully many communities monitored stored food through winter. Quantities mattered, consumption mattered, timing mattered. A bad estimate in autumn could become a serious problem by late winter. People understood this very well. Toward evening, a rider finally appears. The sight creates immediate excitement. You spot him first, a dark figure moving steadily across a snowy road. The horse progresses at a respectable pace. The rider heads directly toward the tower. Good news travels quickly. Potential supplies travel even faster. By the time the visitor arrives, everyone has already formed theories, most proving correct, as usual. The rider carries messages and a modest collection of provisions from a nearby settlement. Nothing extraordinary. Yet the reaction suggests he has arrived bearing gold, fresh bread, dried fish, additional grain, a little ale. The inventory instantly improves, not dramatically. Enough! The veteran visibly relaxes. The younger guard begins planning future feasts again. Everyone tells him to slow down. The rider remains for supper. Stories accompany the meal. News accompanies the stories. Weather reports accompany the news. Information flows alongside food. Both are welcome. One particularly interesting rumor involves a village several days away where a mill wheel supposedly froze solid during a severe cold spell. The story may be accurate or improved. Distance often enhances storytelling. No one present can verify it. The rider certainly enjoys telling it. Night settles outside. The fire burns steadily. The newly arrived supplies occupy their places on shelves and in storage chests. The visual difference feels surprisingly important. Human beings often take comfort from visible abundance. Even modest abundance. The tower breathes easier tonight. Not literally, though it almost seems capable of it. Later, while helping stack wood near the hearth, you notice old markings carved into one of the storage shelves. Tiny lines scratched into the wood form a sequence of tally marks. Someone kept count there long ago. Food, perhaps. Firewood, perhaps. No explanation survives. The marks remain, a silent reminder. Winter accounting is not new. Generations before you watched supplies diminish. Generations before you waited for deliveries. Generations before you measured time partly through the contents of storage rooms. The concerns feel remarkably familiar. Before climbing to the sleeping chamber, you take one final look around the lower room. The fire glows warmly. Shelves appear slightly fuller. The dog seems happier. Most importantly, nobody looks worried. Winter still stretches ahead. The season has not surrendered. Yet tonight the tower possesses enough food, enough fuel, and enough confidence to face another week. Sometimes that is all anyone truly needs. Not certainty, not abundance, just enough. Enough to continue, enough to wait for spring, enough to sleep peacefully while snow drifts quietly across the dark countryside beyond the walls. One morning, something changes, not dramatically, not all at once. Yet after months of winter, you notice it immediately. Water, a single drop falls from the edge of the tower roof and lands on a stone below. Then another, then another. You stop for a moment and listen. The sound feels unfamiliar, almost surprising. Throughout most of the season, water arrived frozen. Frost-coated surfaces, snow-buried roads, ice clung stubbornly to shaded corners. Now something is shifting. The thaw has begun, only slightly. Only cautiously, yet it has begun. The morning air still feels cold. Your breath still appears in pale clouds. Snow still covers much of the countryside. Even so, the sunlight feels different. Warmer, perhaps. Softer. The sort of difference that would escape notice during any other season. After a winter spent measuring every degree of comfort, however, the change feels unmistakable. You climb to the observation platform shortly after dawn. The view confirms your suspicion. White fields remain everywhere, yet darker patches have appeared. Small areas of exposed earth emerge beside roads. Certain hillsides show streaks of brown where snow has retreated. Frozen streams display thin ribbons of moving water near their edges. The countryside is waking slowly, very slowly. The younger guard notices it too. His excitement borders on unreasonable. He points toward every patch of exposed ground as though personally responsible for creating it. The veteran remains skeptical. Spring, he insists, enjoys making promises it does not always keep. A cold storm could still arrive. Heavy snow could still return. The younger guard refuses to accept such pessimism. Their disagreement becomes a daily ritual. Neither side wins. Not yet. Throughout the morning, small signs continue appearing. The dog spends more time outside. Birdsong becomes easier to hear. A pair of crows investigate areas where snow has melted near the road. Life seems slightly busier, slightly louder. The tower notices. Everyone notices. Winter remains present, yet no longer invincible. Near midday, a traveller stops briefly at the tower while heading north. Mud covers portions of his boots. The sight attracts immediate attention. For months, snow dominated everything. Now roads begin transforming into something entirely different. Something messier. The traveller complains about it enthusiastically. Nobody feels much sympathy. Mud represents progress. The younger guard practically celebrates. The traveller accepts food, shares news, and continues on his way. After he leaves, conversation turns naturally towards spring. Fields, planting, travel, markets, repairs. Future plans emerge from every direction. Winter encourages endurance. Spring encourages imagination. A small stream below the hill produces a new sound this afternoon. You hear it while standing watch. Moving water, the noise feels oddly cheerful. For months the landscape seemed asleep beneath snow and ice. Now faint signs of motion return. Not everywhere, not completely. Enough! The tower itself responds to the change as well. Snow no longer remains on the southern wall for entire days. Icicles shrink. Damp patches appear where frozen surfaces begin releasing moisture. The old building seems to stretch after a long sleep. By late afternoon, clouds drift across a pale blue sky. Sunlight breaks through occasionally, creating bright flashes across melting snow. The effect transforms the countryside. Fields sparkle, roads gleam, puddles reflect the sky. Beauty arrives in unexpected form. The younger guard discovers the season's first flower near a sheltered patch of ground. At least he claims it is the first. No one bothers verifying. The flower receives considerable attention regardless. Tiny, fragile, determined. The veteran examines it and immediately begins telling a story about an earlier spring decades ago. Naturally, every season reminds him of another season. Every event reminds him of another event. The story grows longer than necessary. No one minds. The fire burns lower these days, not because fuel has become scarce, because warmth arrives more easily. People still gather near the hearth during evenings. The habit remains too deeply established to abandon immediately. Yet cloaks loosen more often. Hands spend less time extended toward the flames. The difference feels subtle, yet real. After supper, you climb the observation platform once more. The sunset is beautiful. Bands of gold spread across the horizon. Snow-covered fields glow softly beneath the fading light. Forests appear dark and calm against the evening sky. For several minutes, nobody speaks. There is nothing to add. The view says enough. Somewhere in the distance, geese cross the sky. You hear them before you see them. A familiar sound, a seasonal sound. Heads turn upward immediately. The birds pass overhead in a shifting formation before disappearing toward the north. The younger guard grins. The veteran pretends not to. The dog barks at them anyway, on entirely separate pin. Darkness arrives later than it did only a few weeks ago. That fact alone improves everyone's mood. Evening stretches comfortably. Conversations continue longer. Tasks feel less rushed. The tower seems brighter, not because of additional candles, because daylight lingers. One by one, stars emerge above the countryside. The air remains cold enough to remind you that winter has not surrendered completely. Frost may still return tomorrow morning. Snow may still fall before the season ends. No one knows. No one can know. Yet tonight hope feels easier. You sit beside the hearth before bed and watch firelight dance across familiar walls. The chair nobody uses remains empty. The old lantern still hangs above the hearth. The mysterious carving upstairs remains unexplained. The tower has changed very little. The world outside has, and perhaps so have you. Months ago, every day felt dominated by cold weather and uncertainty. Now the future seems larger. Roads will open, travelers will increase, villages will grow busier. The season is turning, slowly, patiently, one drop of water at a time. When you finally climb toward the sleeping chamber, you pause briefly near a narrow opening overlooking the countryside. Moonlight reflects from patches of snow and pools of meltwater alike. Winter and spring share the landscape tonight, neither fully victorious. Both present, and somewhere between them stands the Watchtower, quietly observing another change in the endless cycle of seasons. The winter ends the way it began, quietly. No trumpet announces the final snowfall. No messenger arrives carrying official confirmation. No great ceremony marks the passing of the season. One morning, you simply realize that winter no longer rules the countryside. The transformation has been gradual. Snow retreated from roads first, then from fields, then from hillsides. Now only scattered patches remain in shaded places where sunlight arrives reluctantly. The world beyond the tower has changed, and so has the tower itself. You wake before dawn as usual. Habit has become stronger than necessity. The sleeping chamber feels familiar now. The straw mattress that once seemed uncomfortable feels ordinary. The rough wool blanket that once felt heavy now feels reassuring. Months create their own kind of adaptation. You descend the staircase slowly. The lower chamber greets you with familiar scents. Wood smoke, old timber, cooked grain, warm stone near the hearth. The fire still burns. Though smaller than it did during the coldest weeks, the tower no longer needs such fierce protection from the weather. Spring has taken over that responsibility. Outside, birds greet the morning before the sun appears. Their calls drift through open spaces where winter winds once howled. The sound feels almost strange. You had forgotten how lively the world could become. After breakfast, you climb to the observation platform. The sight waiting above is remarkable, not because it is dramatic, because it is ordinary. Roads are visible again. Fields have emerged. Streams flash silver beneath sunlight. Farmers move through distant land preparing for the growing season. The countryside is awake. Life has resumed its outward motion. The younger guard points toward a wagon travelling along a road that remained empty for much of winter. Another follows behind it. Then another. Traffic has returned. The veteran notices as well. He says little, yet you catch a faint smile. Perhaps he enjoys seeing the landscape come alive again, or perhaps he enjoys proving that spring eventually arrives no matter how much he complains about it. Either explanation seems possible. Throughout the day, visitors come and go more frequently than before. Travelers stop for directions, messengers pass through, villagers exchange news. The tower feels connected to the wider world once again. The isolation of winter begins fading into memory. Not forgotten, simply finished. Near midday, you notice something else. The chair beside the hearth remains empty. Even now, after all these months, no one sits there. No one explains why. The mystery survives another season. Some things never change. The same can be said for the old lantern above the fire. It still hangs in its familiar place. The carved marks on the shelf remain. The strange symbol in the stone upstairs remains equally puzzling. Winter arrived. Winter departed. The tower stayed. Generations before you witnessed similar seasons. Generations after you will do the same. The thought feels comforting. The building belongs to time itself more than it belongs to any individual. Afternoon, sunlight fills the observation platform with warmth not felt for many months. You rest a hand against the stone wall. It no longer feels painfully cold, only cool. The difference seems enormous. Below, a stream rushes past carrying melted snow toward distant rivers. Grass appears in scattered patches. Tiny flowers dot parts of the hillside. Colour has returned. The world looks less severe, less silent, less lonely. Toward evening, the dog that adopted the tower months ago lies near the entrance, enjoying sunlight. The animal appears entirely satisfied with life. A sensible approach. The younger guard talks excitedly about future plans. Journeys, markets, festival, adventures. The veteran listens patiently, then reminds him that plenty of work remains. This exchange has happened before. It will happen again. Some traditions require preservation. As sunset approaches, you climb the observation platform one final time. The sky glows gold above distant hills. Birds cross overhead. Smoke rises from cottages scattered across the countryside. The landscape feels larger than it did during winter. Not physically larger, emotionally larger. Possibility has returned. The long season of endurance has ended. You stand quietly for a while, listening, watching, remembering the storms, the deep snow. No, the freezing nights, the stories beside the hearth, the shared meals, the laughter, the boredom, the friendships. All of it feels close, yet already slightly distant. Winter possesses that quality. While living through it, the season seems endless. Afterward becomes a collection of memories. The sun finally slips below the horizon. Evening settles gently across the land. You descend the staircase. The fire glows warmly below. Familiar faces gather around it. Conversation drifts through the chamber. Nothing extraordinary happens. That feels appropriate. The season ends not with spectacle but with continuity. Life simply moves forward. And now, as the tower settles into another peaceful night, it is time to let the story settle as well. The fire burns softly. The walls hold the last warmth of the day. Outside, spring breezes move across fields that only recently slept beneath snow. You imagine the tower standing beneath countless sunsets yet to come. Travelers will arrive. Guards will watch the roads. Storms will return in future winters. Flowers will bloom again each spring. The old stone structure will remain where it has always stood, observing seasons pass one after another with patient certainty. And you, having spent a winter within its walls, can finally rest. The cold winds have faded. The long nights have shortened. The roads are open once more. The countryside breathes easily. The firelight grows softer. Voices become distant. The tower grows quiet. Above, stars emerge one by one in the deepening sky. Beyond the walls, streams murmur gently through the darkness. The scent of wood smoke lingers in the air. Warmth remains near the hearth. Everything feels calm. Everything feels settled. So you close your eyes and allow the old watchtower to fade into the peaceful distance, standing beneath the stars as it always has, watching silently over fields, forests, roads, and dreams. Sleep well,